Yo guys, Theo here on Common Sense. Welcome to another episode of Human Beings, the podcast where we're very interested in individuals, both what they're up to today and what they can teach us, but also how they became that way, I should say. Today's guest is by far the most requested and anticipated one. He needs no introduction, I think. Ladies and gentlemen, mostly gentlemen, let's be honest. Natural Hypertrophy. Hello and welcome.
Hello, everyone. Hello, YouTube. And hello to the 2% of female viewers that watch fitness content on YouTube, too.
Yes, so I would call you a YouTuber, a natural bodybuilder, a sort of big brother figure, possibly, a philosopher. Those I always write down little descriptive titles like that. But if you were to describe and present yourself, who you are, and what you're about, what would you tell us?
Well, I think that the Big Brother appellation is perfect because it's what I seek to become as much as
Mm,
possible. Where, unfortunately, in fitness, you oftentimes become a father figure, and that can
mm,
become dangerous because you have a lot of authority and people follow you blindly. Whereas a brother is someone that you walk side by side with. And this is what I
mm,
try to emulate, and this is what I want to become. Someone who guides by example, but who also lets people know that, hey, this idea that the people that you watch are better than you is bullshit, and that you have the potential to become greater than what you watch. This is the
mm.
entire point of fitness, in my opinion. And this is something that I saw lacking on the platform. And so in 2020, I finally decided to jump the shark and start making videos to see if people would resonate. And I'm sure that you found out the same thing where we are a lot more alike than we are different. And there are many people who share that mindset of growth and togetherness.
100%. And you said it a little bit, but just explain what's the difference between a father and brother figure, would you say?
Well, the issue with the father is that your dad has your best interest in mind. And so if
Mm,
he tells you to do X or Y and you do it without questioning it, it's in your best interest. But on YouTube, these father figures are not that. They have their best interest in mind. And so oftentimes you will end up following the advice of a guy who's doing that solely because it benefits him, brings him
mm,
fame or money, etc. And it's very tough to distinguish the two when you're a young man, especially if you're a young man who didn't have a father figure and who craves that that masculine identity and that guidance in your life. You are very, very likely to be misguided. So it's always safer for me to have a position where I'm horizontal to you instead of being purely vertical. And the verticality is, of course, unavoidable. I understand that. You are the YouTuber, you make the videos, people still look up, but we want to mitigate that as much as possible.
mm. No, I like that. I try to be the same. I don't know, you probably don't know this about me, but I'm someone that grew up with an autistic little brother. And so I realized that in a way, my upbringing shaped me into being a really good big brother in a sense. So it's in a different way. It's not just about YouTube, but I just noticed that. And so I just kind of like that you say immediately, like, yeah, the big brother sort of thing. That's what I'm going for. But okay, I just want to see what are you up to like professionally? Like, what do you do actually? Like, you're a YouTuber. I know you get some income through like donations or support from subscribers like that. But what else do you do?
Well, I used to very recently also work for a big US company where I was
Mm,
working in AI and machine learning. That ended recently. And when it ended, I realized that it's no longer what I want to do. So I'm not going to unveil all of my plans here, but I do have certain ideas in mind of being able to turn my talents and my ability to guide people into something that I can do long term, which would be best aligned with my happiness. But for the time being, yes, it's mostly through donations and support for the content that I produce.
mm. Pretty awesome. And yeah, so we're going to get into more about the kinds of content we both do. But now I want to go back to what I call, well, I'm interested to hear people's origin story. Like, how did it all start? So I want to go all the way back to little, well, when you were just natural, not natural hypertrophy yet, and sort of where did you grow up, your family situation, everything that you can think of that's significant.
Yeah. So I grew up in France, spent the first 20 years of my life there in Paris. And my early childhood was really good. I was a very cute kid. I was much more intelligent than the average kid. I started reading very early on, much earlier than is anticipated. I think in France, you're supposed to start reading at maybe 6 years old. I was already reading by myself at the age of 4 because I was lucky enough to have parents who pushed that onto me. We already had back then, like my mom was ahead of the curve. She was really against computers, screens, TV. I was only allowed to watch TV if it was to watch documentaries. So I think the first time I watched a cartoon, I was 8 or 9 years old. Before that, it was animals, animals, animals. And I would spend hours watching these tapes again, again, and again. And this became an obsession of mine where I knew everything there was to know about animals. And I wanted to be not a veterinarian. I was not interested in that, but I wanted to become an explorer. So this was like a big part of my imagination growing up, how related to my peers also, because I ended up being above them in a way where I would like have gatherings of kids when I was 5 or 6, and I would tell them stories. And it was interesting because already back then I felt myself above them. And this was a form of arrogance that was starting to form in my young brain because I could see that I was more intelligent than them. They were very easy to manipulate. And I could have become a very bad person, a dangerous person. But luckily, nature, or unluckily, nature sort of cured me because puberty destroyed all of that. Puberty and all of the peers around me gave them size, strength, attractiveness towards the girls of our classes, and I got none of that. My puberty just gave me acne and it made me greasy. But I was the same size, I was the same weight, and I was just shocked because suddenly all of the good faith I had gathered all these years of being cute and intelligent was for nothing. Because now I was regarded as a pariah, and I was really, there's always that clique of nerdy kids that are rejected in a classroom, like 2 or 3. That was me. That was me and my clique. And it really is like it was an ego death in a sense, where I realized back then, wow, okay, so all that I've gotten was because people perceived me as good looking, and now I don't have that anymore. So even though I'm still more intelligent than them, it's completely useless. And that was very difficult years from 11 to 13. And then after that, a lot of bullying ensued, and I realized, all right, well, you will not be able to get by with your good looks and charm anymore, so you have to have something else. And this is when I started to really think about physical development and the
Sorry,
body.
sorry, just to ask, what kind of bullying was that? What did that look like?
It was extremely violent. So I did not go through mental bullying. The internet was not really a thing back then. So you would not get harassed that much because we didn't have a phone with the internet on us and Facebook wasn't a thing. So it was just pure beatdowns on a daily basis. And it's interesting because it was so frequent for me that I normalized it. And I thought it was not necessarily acceptable, but to me, it wasn't that shocking because it was my reality and the reality of the kids surrounding me. Because at the school I was at was horribly violent. Like we had, for example, if French people watch this, I'm certain they'll recognize it the second I say the name. We had a game called Le Petit Pont Massacreur. And Le Petit Pont Massacreur is essentially there is a ball, so there's a soccer ball in the recess yard, and people play with it. And if the ball goes in between your legs, the entirety of the courtyard, so we're talking hundreds of kids, rushes you and beats you down on the ground until you can run and tap one of the garbage cans that's in the yard. You did not get to opt out of this game. If you are out in the courtyard and the ball went in between your legs, you got beat down. That was one game, and it wasn't even one of the worst ones. We've had many kids hospitalized, like with serious injuries because of that game. So to me, that was sort of like my daily life.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So for me, it was because when I listen to your background story, I can recognize a lot, like noticing quite early in life that I'm more intelligent than most of my peers. When you say it, I haven't thought about it in a long time, but when you say it, I'm like, yeah, maybe I had some manipulative traits too, because I noticed how easy it was to lie, and people would believe it. And I would spot other people lying. Bullying for me wasn't so much like I got a little bullied in like kindergarten, but it was more, again, with the autistic brother, like we would fight a lot over completely unreasonable things. And I would, in a way, normalize this too, because it happened on a daily basis. And I think, like, how old are you?
Right now, I'm in
Yeah.
my 30s.
In your 30s. So I would guess you're a few years older than me then. I'm 32. But for me, I guess I went to a very nice school, like a kind school. Like there wasn't that much of that kind of bullying, like actual beatdowns. They're quite rare. I would say it was more you know, what was the word I'm looking for? Covert, that you get a little frozen out or something. For me, I've been in the strange spot that I've never been the outcast kid that you talk about, but I've never felt like I'm the completely super popular kid that ever. I felt like I always had to fight very hard to, I don't know, get girls, get to be with the cool kids or whatever. But okay, so very interesting. But you started saying that it was because of this experience that you started thinking about the physical.
Yes, yeah, because I'd come to realize that that brain I valued so much was really protected by what was around. And for
Mm,
so long, it needed protection because, like, as you found out, when you're more intelligent than the kids around you, you can play them like puppets. But eventually, if these kids don't regard you or they don't like you, it doesn't work anymore. So now you have to find a way to protect that gray blob that's up there. And so I was very weak and very meek back then. So the way I was starting to defend myself is I started to like try to kick people because I understood that upper body strength wasn't my thing. So I would train against the punching board that was in the KGB that we had in the house. I would take knives to this thing too. I would defend myself with knives because sometimes I felt like this was the only way I could defend myself against much bigger and numerous groups of people. I never had to do that, thankfully. The kicks were enough. I found out that if you kick someone in the solar plexus, they rethink their ability to mess with you because it really hurts. And
mm,
so for maybe 2 years of my life, I was a complete maniac where if you approached me with any semblance of aggressivity, even if I thought like you were going to do something to me, I would just do it first because that way it gets out of the way. But the problem is that it also made me even more unlikable because I started to hurt my friends. And so it was a situation that was untenable because it was between being left alone and forcefully like pushing people away because no one wants to hang out around the maniac. And thankfully, I didn't have to actually make that choice. Life made that choice for myself because at the age of 14, I was removed from that horrible school and I was put in a school, just like you described, that was much kinder, or no one
mm.
thought. And so when I arrived there, I was like, wow, that's like a brand new world where like there's no brawls, no one is going to punch you, you won't get like you won't have a baseball bat taken to your knee like randomly like it used to happen in my previous school. And so I was just suddenly able to just be a pacifist, which is what I've always wanted to be. And from there on, all of that balance was left behind. I don't think I've even gotten into one fight since then.
Mm, nice. So, but this is some time ago now, and I guess because I'm someone that has a very clear before and after in my life. Like when I talk about this with origin story, like I very much want to hear from all the way from the start. But for me, I had this moment. Like I said, I'm 32 now. When I was 25. I had not been feeling well for a long time. And then, this sort of pleasure, hedonist coping with life, like no real ambition, anything I study or any job I have. It's just because I got to do something. And then I'm just drinking, partying, all that kind of stuff. And I hit rock bottom and started having these panic attacks that actually made me, they were so intense that I actually started contemplating suicide, which before I thought I had many times been like, oh, I don't want to live anymore. But when that happened, it was like, okay, I need to do something. Clearly, I do not want to die because now when I feel like this is happening and I'm actually considering it, okay, I have to do something. So I put myself through basically like self-imposed exposure therapy, overcame these panic attacks finally, and then in the process I had shed so much of my old like trauma and wounding that I didn't even understand back then. But the point is that I found out since that's because that when I started training and improve my diet and work on myself in this sort of way, but I've had to discover that okay, a major change happened. But you're not completely done just because something like that happened. But I guess what I want to come to is that do you have a particular moment or time or happening that really like flicked the switch in that sort of way?
Yeah, I think so. There were like slight changes throughout my life in middle school and high school where I had some realizations. Like for example, at the end of high school, I realized, hey, I'm spending so much of my energy and time trying to be likable to people that I don't even like. Why am I doing
Mm,
this? This is when I realized that social pressure is a thing, and this is when I decided to just do away with it. So that was big, but it was still at a time where I didn't really love myself very much, and I was not comfortable in my own skin. And that's a horrible feeling. And it's a feeling that many people live with and they don't even realize it because we've normalized it so much. Like, oh,
mm,
it's okay to have imperfections. You're perfect the way you are. And that's not true. You can always improve. And the best version of you, the one that you can wake up in every morning and felt great is just around the corner. But you have to turn the corner. And that corner for me was the summer, I think it was of my 17th birthday, where I had, for some reason, I became completely obsessed with training. And I was in the mountains of Europe. It was completely remote, no internet, no distractions. And for that summer, I trained, I think, between 3 and 4 hours every single day, where I would wake up at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. I would go bike or sprint in the mountains for an hour to 2 hours. Then I would lift for an hour, rest throughout the day, go swim, and then come back in the afternoon, lift for another hour. And this is all I did. I ate, slept, and trained. That's all I did. And at the end of that 2 months, I remember there wasn't mirrors where I used to live. So you had mirrors in the bathroom where you could see your face, but I couldn't see my body. And so after these 2 months, I remember we went back home and we stopped at a hotel. And the hotel had a full body mirror. And I remember stepping into the bathroom and looking up and not recognizing my body because I had like lost all of that fat. And I remember still vividly like that body image I had. This was the best body I've ever seen. Like I look like a natural Dragon Ball Z character. And I remember seeing this and being like, okay, so that's what you're supposed to be doing. That's what you are not doing for all of these years. And from that point on, with a slight mishap when I was in college because of depression, I never gave up on that. And I found that as long as I can hold on to training, regardless of what's happening around in my life, it doesn't matter. Because this is the stability that is, in a sense, keeping everything together.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. That's actually, I made a little post to collect some questions or whatever, what you and I should talk about. And someone asked, let me see if I can find, he asked about, I guess because I don't remember the way he phrased it, but using lifting as an escape, sort of, he talked about, and pretty much went on to describe that sometimes I feel like I have nothing going on in my life, and the only thing I'm like good at and know what to do about is lifting. And in a way, you didn't say that you feel that way, but you said that that's something. As long as I can hold on to that, you gave a different view than this guy because he seems kind of like worried that am I kind of coping by just holding on to my lifting this hard. Like, what would you say about that?
I think that this is a stage that every young man who starts to lift will enter, and it's what is known as gymcelling, where the gym becomes this thing where you see progress, your work creates results, it's incredibly addictive, it makes you more attractive, it makes you more confident. And so instead of taking these aspects and applying them to your everyday life, you just zero in on that one thing. And suddenly it becomes almost useless because it's supposed to be a tool. The gym and the muscle you build, everything needs to be applied in your life. If it just feeds into itself and a gym session becomes another gym session and you become stronger to become stronger, now it's a tautology and it can create, in a sense, a bubble around you that makes you completely unrelatable because you have nothing else going on. I think you already know that, but like women are not really into men who only talk about the gym, who only care about the gym. They really like a guy who looks like he lifts, but has other things because that makes you interesting, which is also the reason why some people will tell you that training in itself is a cope and that women want men who are like naturally big. That doesn't exist. You just go to the gym and you don't talk about it. But outside of that, is especially if you have social anxiety and you have a tough time relating to others, since the gym is an occupation you do by yourself, it's not a team sport, it can become addictive to these personalities, but that just reinforces the loneliness. And then you get to a point where you have a great body, you're very strong, but you are completely unable to use it. And these very same people will then say, oh, maybe I wasted my time. No, you misapplied your energy and you didn't use it properly. The issue is not the gym, it's what you made with the gym.
No, I agree. And since we're there, like, if to a guy like that finds himself kind of being a gymcel currently, like, what would you tell him to change?
I would say not to do less gym time, but want to be more flexible and to understand that just because you miss a session is not the end of the wood. It actually might be good sometimes to be able to let go of it, especially if it means doing something social instead. I know that I used to be like that, where if I had the choice between going out or gym, it was always gym. But again, that reinforces itself. So that's the one aspect. And the second aspect is try and be more social. I don't like people who treat the gym like a social club, but there is a certain degree of togetherness that is like built into that building that you can just tap into. Because in reality, the majority of people in the gym If you go up to them and you compliment them on their arms, they're very happy to become your buddy. And that can start a virtuous cycle because you're in the gym, you're full of endorphins. This is when you feel the most confident. You can easily chat up strangers. Then you can do that outside, in a bar, in a library, etc. And then you start to expand that circle. And your confidence becomes something that is real.
No, I think that's great advice. And I would say that's how it happened for me a little bit, that I got into all of this. First, I absolutely love it because I come from this terrible panic attack phase. And I go into this, like, I've never felt this way before and I'm feeling better and better, you know. But I tend to be that way, that I have to almost be a little bit too extreme, a bit too obsessive with something first. So I would be like that, you know, turn down anything social that interfered with my training, or like, oh, I can't control what I eat or something. And that's what I've also realized throughout these years, that, you know, it's a strength in a sense to be able to be that obsessive. That's what makes you be able to push so far, but it can limit you in other ways. So that exactly what I would say, specifically when it comes to social things, I think is when you should consider that maybe every once in a while let that go before the training.
Yeah, because we do tend to glorify this like hyper obsessive eating where I will eat this and never this, and I will control everything that comes into my body. Okay, that has value. But if you're the type of person who goes to the restaurant with a Tupperware with your chicken and rice, as I've seen bodybuilders do, now you're starting to get an eating disorder, and it just separates you from normal people because you're going to look very weird. The truth is that you can eat at a restaurant and like eat something that's a little bit greasy. It won't kill your abs. You're fine. You can have one session that you push back one day. It won't change anything. I personally have actually found the opposite, where when I was this like hyper psycho rigid character, my gains weren't that great because I lacked the flexibility to move around my schedule and understand recovery. And now that I'm much more flexible, suddenly the progress is pretty much like uninterrupted. And more importantly, the injuries are gone. And injuries oftentimes are the result of people just bashing their head against the wall, hoping the wall is going to break. But what breaks first is always your head. And that's lack of flexibility.
Oh yes, oh yes, that was definitely me you described with the injuries there. But so let's talk about how you got into training and when you, like, the way you train today. When you sort of, how long have you been doing that, and how did you come to that point?
So I've been training for 15 years now. And I started in a way that is completely suboptimal and people nowadays would laugh at, but it was the best I could do, where I would do girl push-ups because I couldn't do normal push-ups. I would curl chairs because I didn't have dumbbells. So I would take a chair that was like 4 pounds, and that was like enough for me to get a good workout. I would do sit-ups, and that was pretty much that. And I remember back then I was so weak that doing that for 15 minutes spent me, where I couldn't move my body afterwards. And then I would wait 24 hours and I would repeat that. So I did not have an optimal 3 times a week push-pull leg split. It was every 24 hours, do the exact same thing and do just slightly more. And I went from girl push-ups on my knees to doing sets of 20, 30 clean push-ups within 1, 2 years, because I was just repeating the tiny exercises again, again, and again. So I did that from 14-ish to 16, 17. 17, I got gifted a weight set with dumbbells, with plates, etc. And that's when I started lifting weights in my bedroom. And I would do, back then I didn't know that it was named that, giant sets, where I would do exercise after exercise with no rest, and I would just like cycle. So if I tap back into memory, I would do cheat curls, followed by a shitty front raise, followed by a row, followed by some ab isolation, and I would just repeat that. I didn't train triceps back then, which I'm now paying the price because my biceps are way above my triceps. But this is what I did. And again, obsession, every single day at 5 p.m. sharp, I would be in my bedroom training, regardless of what happened. So school would let out, the other kids, like in high school, want to hang out, smoke weed, drink, and I would tell them, no, I have to go train. And I would go train every day. So I made a lot of progress. And that was until the age of 19, 20-ish. And I went from 110 to 180 in that time span.
Wow.
So that's a lot of weight put on through puberty, of course, but I looked like a completely different person. And that was without a gym, which is the reason why I tell people who want to get started, you don't really need a gym membership. You can start at home and you can still make great gains. After that, I left for America. And in America, I started lifting weights because it's part of the culture. It's huge. And so it was my first introduction to an actual gym, and also seeing that, well, yeah, I am big, but like compared to these other guys that I saw in the gym, I was not that big suddenly, because there were guys benching 4 or 5 plates, guys that lifting 6 plates. And suddenly I was exposed to all of that, and it really pushed my standards, but it also pushed my body dysmorphia, because this is also when I discovered bulking. And so I started bulking super aggressively because I bought into the idea that eat big to get big. And it's crazy to see, but back then I truly felt like this was lean mass. Like if you had
Mm.
asked me back then, I would be like, yeah, pure gains, bro. In reality, I was getting super fat because I went from 180 to 240 in the span of 3 years. And
Wow.
that's completely unrealistic for a natural. It's not possible. So it was like
Mm.
60 pounds of fat pretty much that I then lost. And this is when I transitioned back into a home gym. And I realized, okay, you destroyed your body. Great job, idiot. Now you have to redo all of that again. This is when I started the channel. So if you go back to my first videos, I'm a little bit fluffy because I'm still recovering from these stupid bulks. And from there on, I discovered the home gym, the beauty of the home gym, and I really started to own in my training and really realize, okay, I don't care about anything else but aesthetics and hypertrophy. Like for so long, I lied to myself saying, oh, I want to be strong. That was nonsense. I was being
Mm.
peer pressured by the type of content produced on fitness, unfortunately.
Mm.
And it then led me slowly but surely to my 25th, 26th, 27th year, and now into my early 30s, where I have now a split where I'm in my home gym. I have my basement where I train legs and arms, and I will do my upper body stuff at a commercial gym. And I feel like I've reached an equilibrium where I'm still making excellent gains. I'm balancing out my physique. I'm having the most fun I've ever had, which is key.
Mm.
And I'm at a point where I truly think that my best gains are still ahead of me, which for many
Mm.
people in their 30s seems impossible. It seems like it's already behind you. And I personally don't buy that because my body is showing me that we're becoming more vital and more energetic by the day. And I don't see why this would stop.
Mm. No, 100%. Many things I think about that there. I think it's good advice to not even start going to the gym when you start training because, there's all these little things like you don't know exactly what you're doing in the gym. You might be self-conscious and all these things. What I did personally was that I started training at home with like a pull-up bar. Literally, the first 2 weeks were negative pull-ups every other day, like 5 sets. That's all I did. I added on some push-ups. I can't even remember everything now, but in the end, I was doing some crunches, some Bulgarian split squats, some curls, whatever it was. But in the meantime, I was watching a lot of YouTube stuff, just preparing to actually go to the gym. So when I came to the gym after like 5 months of doing that at home, I had like the base level of fitness at least, and some idea of what to do in the gym. So I think it's a great way to start. And what you're saying that you feel now that your best gains are ahead of like are still on the table or whatever. I feel in a similar way that when I get into this, I watch a lot of content and I try to because you're curious, like what can I expect naturally? How much muscle can you gain naturally? Start searching things like this. What I found was very depressing answers. Like pretty much when I try to be honest, it's like I've almost made all the gains I'm supposed to be able to make in 2 years or something. And I feel a little like blackpilled from that. It's like, really? Everyone bigger than this is on roids? But I just decided that, you know what, I don't buy it. Like, I've been doing this for too short of a time. I'll just find out. And then I feel like that the more I learn and the more I've dialed in my process, I've like way surpassed the shape I was in back then. And I feel the same way like you, that maybe it's going a little slower at this point, but it's in a sense way more steady because it's just like I really know what I'm doing now. But so, how would you? I would like you to describe just your style of lifting. If you try, like, what kinds of exercises and split are you about?
So I've always been a huge hater of bro splits, where to
Mm.
me they never made sense. I've always been a frequency guy. I think that training a muscle group once a week is idiotic, and the fact that it was promoted by drug users to me is not surprising because it might work for them, but naturals have never trained like this. You cannot find me one natural from the silver or bronze era that trained the muscle once a week. They had full body splits with high frequency for the most part. So that's always what I believed from the start to still today. where I will hit a muscle as often as I can throughout the week. And I will allow the muscle to tell me, hey, is this too much or not too much? So my triceps, for example, are like typically extremely capricious, where I will sometimes train them hard. And for 4 days, they'll be like, okay, we're out of commission. So don't train us again. And I will not force it. I will not say, no, 48-hour frequency. I'll just listen to the body. But then you have certain muscles where you start to treat them like this, where you realize that, wow, that's actually what that muscle wants. So muscles of the back, lats, traps, rhomboids, whatever, I've never been to a point where they feel like they cannot walk more. So every time I step into the gym, I'm going to train back. That's unavoidable. Same for forearms. There's a lot of discussion nowadays about small muscles actually recovering slower. For forearms especially, I don't agree. Where if you look at the way they're used functionally for humans, they're constantly in use because you're constantly grabbing stuff. So at the start, when you start to hit them hard with weights and isolation, yeah, they might be a little bit sore. But after a while, I can't tell you the last time I had sore forearms. And I'm at a point where I train forearms every single day in some fashion or another, at least 20 minutes. So that's always been my approach for frequency. Then when it comes to the split that I enjoy the most, I love upper lower because to me, it makes the most sense. It's the most synergistic. And it's the one that allows me to put all of my energy into one part of the body. If I go in and I have to do heavy dips and heavy squats, to me, that's not going to work because my upper body brain and my lower body brain aren't the same. They're just completely different beings. So if I want to come in and train lower body, that's all I'll do. I'll train lower body and that's it. And neck. Neck is the one part of the upper body that sneaks into the lower body. But the upper body stuff is going to be every single muscle that's in the upper body in a split that makes the most sense. So if I train a press, you can, of course, bet that I'm going to have tricep isolation in there, shoulder isolation, and chest isolation because it's already in the press. And I will use the compound movements to guide the day. I'm a huge believer in compound movements. For bodybuilding, isolation, I've been promoting for a long time, telling people to not skip them, but isolation completes the compound movement. And so oftentimes I will start, for example, with a heavy press, vertical, horizontal, and then the other exercises will complete it. Not that the other exercises are accessories. Nothing is accessory to a bodybuilder because everything is just as important. I will put the same intensity in every set, but it makes a lot more sense, in my opinion, to begin with your heavy press compound because that way you're not limited. If I were to start, for example, with a tricep isolation, I don't want that to become the limiting factor on my ability to push. There are slight differences depending on the compounds. With a dip, for example, I've found that starting with an isolation for the shoulder is not that limiting. But for the triceps, it is. So it's also a game of trying to figure out the way your own body works. But typically, if we were to like scope out and look at my week, I would do something like if I were to look at what I'm doing right now. Today is going to be arm day. So after we're done training, I'm going to go and I'm going to do ring push-ups with weights in the backpack. I'm going to do some rows. I'm going to do some, what was the third exercise? Some forearm in the form of a finger curl. That is the first giant set I'm going to do for 3 sets. Then the second giant set is going to be pinwheel curls. So inside for the forearm and the bicep, some front raises for the upper chest and the front delt. And I'm going to do some abs. There's going to be 6 exercises, 3 sets for each of giant sets. That is going to be, I'm calling it a day. Tomorrow, I'm going to do squats and hyperextensions. Tuesday, I'm going to go to the commercial gym. I'm going to do some T-bar rows. I'm going to do some presses. I'm going to do a bunch of upper body stuff. Wednesday is going to be a rest day, which doesn't really exist for me. So I'm going to be outside and do weighted carries. And it's just rinse and repeat, like the upper body days, lower body days. It all falls into just this mix of just constant training where everything still recovers. I'm still at 100%. You will never catch me sandbagging a set, but it's both more hard work, more volume, and more frequency than I used to do, while still being much more potent. Where I can like point to you times in my past where I trained more than what I do now, but the results were shittier because it wasn't organized properly.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of cool stuff. I just laughed that you did the rest day on Wednesday, little air quotes, because I have the exact same thing going with my split, and it's specifically Wednesday also. So what I've been following for some time is I like to keep it simple, honestly. And I like push-pull legs. It's a good split. I like upper-lower also. And I was at a point like 3 years ago, I was like, I like both of these. I just can't make up my mind which one I like the most. And I realized I can mix them. So I follow a sort of upper-lower push-pull leg split, where the Wednesday and Sundays are rest days, like you say, because that's a great opportunity to maybe have slightly shorter sessions and maybe more isolation movements, but get in stuff like neck and forearms, maybe abs. I did calves on those days for some time. So yeah, but what I wanted to ask is, I know you're definitely like a bodybuilder. Like you told, I knew that from before. You used to cope thinking like, oh, I care about strength, but you're actually about the aesthetics and the physique. I still want to ask though, do you have any other conditions? Like, is it like, no, clearly we're going to get and talk about steroids in a while also, but do you see what I mean? Other than that, is there like just anything I can do to maximize my size, my aesthetics, or is there something that goes before that, or something you want, the little asterisks about that?
Yes, yeah, because when I say I don't care about strength, I should say I don't care about conventional strength in the
Mm,
way people promote it. As in, for example, how much do you bench? My answer
mm,
is to that, I do not bench because I
mm,
don't like the exercise. I don't see why this somehow became the king of the presses. It's not even that great for hypertrophy. So I'll
agreed.
tell them, I usually will answer them 4 plates, and they'll say, wow, that's pretty strong. I'll say, yeah, on the dip, because I'm not
Mm,
benching. After that, stuff like squats, deadlifts. I have lifts where I'm really strong out of the blue, like good mornings. I can rep 3 plates on the good morning. I don't see who this is going to impress outside of people who train West Side. I can do that. I do not care about it because to me it's not exciting. The one aspect and area of strength that I like a lot is grip because I'm
mm,
obsessed with forearms. And for some reason, my brain loves the idea of being able to hold onto something heavy. Like when I
mhm,
can pinch grip the 100-pound plate in the gym and carrying it around when the average person needs 2 hands and they struggle, I feel pretty badass. So that's
mm,
something that I train sneakily on the side because I also know that it doesn't really take away from my bodybuilding. It's not
mm,
taxing my recovery. So I'll do it with like the sand bucket, the rice bucket. I'll do it with weighted carries. But there's always this part of also my mind that wants to always skew it towards more sides. So, for
mhm,
example, if you see what a Husserl stone is, it's the thing that looks like a tombstone that
mm,
strongmen carry in their arms,
mm, mm,
or they have to like get it close to their chest. And usually you do it with your forearms in that position, close to you. I hate that position because that's a lot of upper back. It hurts my forearms. It's not hypertrophic. What I
mm,
found, however, is that if you carry that thing like a pot, like you would a big pot with your
mm,
hands underneath like this, and so now the thing sits way high on your torso, now it's really good because your arm is fully stretched out. So it's a weighted load on the bicep and forearm,
mhm,
and you can feel that this is actually growing the arm. So the second I saw that, I was like, okay, this is my new star. And so now I carry it like this. It's great. Good cardio makes me move around in nature. And on top of that, I get big arms. So
mm,
I will always think like this, where the number one function I want from a movement is how big is it going to make me? If there are
mm,
slight byproducts of strength, I will take it. And at the end of the day, you and I, we train for bodybuilding. We are magnitude stronger than the average person, magnitude stronger than even the average gym goer, where I'm pretty much the strongest guy at my gym. I have a few people who can come close, but when I do dips with 4 plates, people stop and watch. Why?
mm.
Because our standards are really, really low naturally, but also because you train bodybuilding, you're going to get stronger. There's no way around that, especially if you get pretty big.
No, of course. I guess what I wanted to get at, and it seems like that, is that because I think, like, honestly, who's just like a guy absolutely looking to get jacked, but who does not care at all about strength? Like we want it to be an expression of some kind of ability, right? But I think for many, it's like the whole powerlifting thing. I think kind of. Yeah, at least for me, I mean, people that are into that, that's fine, and that's great for you. But I just don't find it very appealing to, on these three lifts with a very specific form, move as much weight as possible that passes some sort of competitive standard. That doesn't interest me so much. But getting stronger, of course, on big movements. But maybe I care. It's one rep strength, 1 rep max strength. That's not the only way to measure strength, right? Like I'm more interested in, like, for instance, what weight do I rep on an exercise. Like, I don't care what my 1 rep max would be on an incline bench press, but I think it's pretty cool that, okay, I can use 100 kilos for reps now, you know. And then for me, I have certain things that I take this as a typical example that, for instance, my legs, my quads are lagging behind a little bit, which is annoying. They used to be a strong point when I got into training, but I've had some persistent hip issues, and I've been persistent in trying to have things my way and just really delaying the rehab process. But still, I know that because stability has been an issue, it's getting better. But I know that I could have kept growing my quads just doing a leg press, but the movement just appeals so little to me, you know. So instead, what I've done recently is that I started kind of transforming my squat into a way more quad dominant squat, like, you know, using heel elevation. And really, I didn't realize how much I let my hips shoot up before, and I really changed it. So for me, it's like, yeah, I definitely care about bodybuilding. Just like you, I tend to think all the time, like, bigger is better, as long as natural, at least. But I have certain things, certain other boxes I kind of want to check at the same time.
I think it's always been a thing because you go back to like Steve Reeves, who was poster boy for bodybuilding in the silver era. A lot of the feats of strength that he had are still very impressive to this day, while the guy was doing incline curls with the 60s, right? I've never seen anyone in a gym do that. I don't think I've ever seen anyone on Instagram do that, at least with proper form. And yet, he didn't care about strength. It was because back then, strength was understood as something more global and general that made a lot more sense and was much more appealing to the average person. Where with powerlifting, because of the specific nature of the sport, it has to be these 3 lifts that, of course, start to skew towards technique, because a bench press nowadays is not really the best testify or the best testimony of your strength. Much more, how much can you cheat the movement by reducing the range of motion? You show that to an average person, they'll say, well, that looks stupid. The guy bent his elbow like this and then did this. How is that a bench press? This is the problem. For their sport, they have to do that if they want to keep winning and break records. But for the average public, and for especially the people who are supposed to be, like, in a sense, talked into doing fitness through this emulation, it's not going to do much. So in a way, it's paradoxical, but bodybuilding, natural bodybuilding, might be a better emissary for strength than powerlifting at this point. And that says a lot.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So, what was it? Yeah, you mentioned grip strength. That's right. Because that's something I'm getting into a bit now. Like forearms, definitely a muscle group I neglected. I've been training them more for this year, pretty much. They're catching up a bit. But my grip strength, though, is not that good. And yeah, I start to feel like you, that it just appeals to me to have a strong ass grip. And I'd say my grip is definitely like weak in comparison to the rest of my strength. I think the only measure I have of it now, I think that the heaviest pronated deadlift I've done is like 170 kilos, and I could do like 50, 60 kilos more with some straps. So I'll just ask you, because to me, I guess I'm a little bit rigid also about my progression schemes. Like I've done it in a very straight fashion with stuff. Like I have my rep range. I'm just going to add 1 rep next workout. Like I just keep doing that thing. With something like grip strength, I'm just like, I don't know that I can do it in the exact same way. Like, I don't know, 3 sets of 8 to 12 or something. So I guess, how do you train grip training? Or would you give me some advice about that?
I would, but for the people watching, this is advice coming from a bodybuilder. There are people who specialize in grip strength, and I'm not one of them. I'm not even close to them. Right? This is advice for people who care about size and also want grip at the same time. So this is what I would advise. The number one thing I would advise is when you train your grip, we actually do want to train it in a way that is going to represent a maximum ability to lift weights with not that much volume. For example, 3 sets of 8 to 12 is not the way to go for grip. I would recommend something like a 3x3 because that's going to be much more correlated to that. So if you do a suitcase deadlift, for example, or one-arm deadlift, you want to keep your reps low and you want to keep the intensity high. You want to be able to hold on to that maximal weight for give or take 2 to 5 seconds and then let go of it. We don't need to be holding on it forever because that's what you already do with all of your other exercises. Whenever you do a pull, your arm and your hand is crisped and it's grasped around that and it never lets go. And it might hold on to it for 40 to 50 seconds. So you already get a lot of that when you do this. The second thing I would say is straps are great. Absolutely. And I would never tell people not to use it. The idea that if you use straps, you're going to have small forearms is nonsensical. But they're not mandatory. I see people who, whenever they train back, they put on straps before even knowing if they're needed. And that to me is potentially idiotic because you will find that a bunch of movements like vertical pulls, rows, your rowing strength is equal to your grip strength. So, for example, for me, if I do a form that I call a chainsaw row, where I'm going to be fairly vertical and really bring the weight up here to get a lot of traps, I don't need straps. For the most part, I don't. I will throw them on if I feel my grip failing, but do not put on the strap before your grip fails. Get as much as you can from that back training for your grip, and then when you can't anymore and it limits you, then you can go in. And then the third aspect, I would say, the majority of your volume for forearm and to get a better grip is going to come from forearm isolation, which might not even look like grip training, but still is. So something, for example, like a finger curl will pump your forearm, will train your forearm, but it's still grip. And actually, a finger curl is much better than a gripper for grip because unlike a gripper where the weight is going to rest across that bone here and then you can press into your own hand, you don't have that with a finger curl. You just have the top. And now it becomes much harder and these movements become much more difficult. So suddenly when you go on to grab a bar, you are much, much stronger automatically. And that is pretty much the extent of what I would say. Now, so like, for example, what you're doing, if you do a double overhand deadlift, that if you apply all of these advices, you should see your strength shoot up, even if you don't train that movement that often.
You know, it's actually a good idea because, like I mentioned, I still have some hip problems. Like squatting is fine now. I want to stay away from like maxing on any deadlift variation, but I could actually train it and see it almost like a grip exercise mainly. When you say finger curls, do you just mean like a wrist curl, but putting the weight all the way out in the fingers, or do you actually mean like individually doing the fingers?
So you will rarely train fingers individually. Like the
Yeah.
digits usually work as a unit, except for the thumb, because it goes in a different direction than the other fingers. So if you really, and this is like starting to dig deep into grip training, but if you really get into it and you start to train with bands for your fingers, you will find out that you will train the extension of the fingers, and then you will train that motion of the thumb individually because it's a different function. But to go back to your question, with a finger curl, you want the handle to roll here,
Yeah.
like especially at the top of the last knuckle, and then you roll it back. So it's not just doing this, it's really allowing that rolling motion. And it trains the finger extensors, of course, and flexors, but it's also going to train more of the inner of the forearm that a lot of people train just through supination, which is great. But if you really want to take it to the next level, like you've seen arm wrestlers who have like this massive bulge, that's how they do it.
Yeah, and that's the one that I think is the most difficult aesthetically, right? Like, because the brachioradialis and the Popeye muscle, the stuff here, you're going to get a lot from just your regular pulling and curling even. I think this is it. But yeah, I've just felt it too, what you're talking about, the finger curls, like intuitively, that's just how I want to do it. I just feel more things firing. I actually got, like, I should have had it like at hand here, but I got this even pronator thing, you know.
I saw it in your video, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, it's kind of a nerd thing. You can get. I used to do that with just a strap and a kettlebell, but it's something. It's a bit more locked in, and then you know, not just the grippers, but these extensors too. I started using. They actually feel great on my elbows. That's been something the last year or so. I've had some elbow tendonitis, and the thing I've noticed helping that the most recently has been these extensors. So yeah, no, that's cool. Grip training. Yeah, you gave me some ideas for how to go about that. But so we're gonna come back to some training topics. But I'd like to ask you about YouTube, like how that started and kind of what your journey as a YouTuber has looked like.
So I started with close to no ambitions, and to be honest, I still have zero ambition when it comes to YouTube, where I was never into it to become big or famous. And I'm honestly always a bit shocked at how big the channel had become, because I would have never thought that people would be interested in like pure hypertrophy and philosophy and all the topics that always just float around my head. So this was almost like a vlog experience for me where I was tired of talking to myself or my cat in the kitchen about these things. It was time for me to talk to a camera. And this is how I started. And actually, this is an advice I give people. One, if you want to start a YouTube channel, don't wait, do it now. There will
Mm,
never be a better time than now. And two, don't even worry about like the technical aspects and is my sound good and my camera good. It doesn't matter. When I started, I had a shitty phone with a shitty camera. Like I didn't even clean the lens before I recorded. Most of my old videos, the lens is dirty, the audio is horrible, and it didn't matter. People were there for the message, and it built up momentum and it built up confidence. Your first videos are going to be bad. You're going to be awkward in front of the camera, but it's because you need more practice. It's a skill that you have to develop. And so I did that for a long time. And for a long time, I didn't even use thumbnails. I just allowed YouTube to just put whatever thumbnail they decided, which was a still from the video. I didn't care about the titles. There was no description or tag. I think a year in, I started using Google Image for my thumbnail, where I would make a video about flexibility. I would type flexibility, take the first image, that's my thumbnail. I didn't even resize it. I didn't care. It just went out as is. After a while, you understand that if you want to be competitive, this is no longer possible. So you start making your own thumbnails. I'm at a point now where I actually enjoy making thumbnails because it's fun. So
mm,
I will always pick the thumbnail that makes me laugh over the one that I know is going to be successful. And it's the same for titles. I'm very instinctive, and sometimes I have titles that pop into my head, and I'm like, okay, this is my title for the video. And oftentimes, titles will dictate what the video is going to be. Like it inspires me to make a video. But that has been my thought process, and I've always kept the channel demonetized because this is what I wanted to remain. I want to be a place where if I have something to say, I will make it and will not expect anything from it. I do not want to have to depend on, oh, do I make views to be able to pay the rent? Because once you enter that mindset, you no longer make good content, or you can make good content, but it's no longer authentic because now it's commercial. And this is the one thing that I refuse to do. It's to become just commercially oriented. If I have to do that to keep surviving on YouTube, I will just go away. So that has been my mindset, and it's still my mindset to this day, where it excites me and it's fun, and I want to keep it that way.
mm. Ah, that sounds great, man. It's like I've taken a slightly different path than you, and I experience sometimes the problems you speak of. Because, okay, I started my channel a bit over 5 years ago when I'm just so happy about the life change I made, and like I'm like amazed I didn't know that I could change my life in this way with these things, training among other things. Like people just need to know about all these things I've found out. That's how I felt, you know. So I share things just completely because I want to. Then suddenly, I started working as a personal trainer for a while, and I knew I wanted to have some kind of own service that I offer that's like a bit wider than just training. So after a while, this became like a full-on professional thing. And yeah, you can make good content still, but what I notice is that sometimes I catch myself being in a mindset of like, what would people click, or what people want to see, or I don't know, that kind of question suddenly. So I would say it's a struggle at times to keep, because I want to have it this way too, authentically. And what I started doing is just looking at having more work in person that's like completely unrelated to the channel too, so I don't have to feel that get into that mindset. I need to make money, I need to get clients, I need people to click my videos, because, and the funny thing is that every time I feel like I'm in a little battle with myself with that, and I just come back to like, just put out what you want to, that you think is helpful to people. That funny enough, that's what give me the other kind of results always. But I know I've heard you speak about like kind of the danger of mixing your passion with your profession. And I can definitely say that there are ups and downs. Sometimes you end up feeling like you're not even working. Like some of the guys that are my clients, I feel like, man, like I have such a privilege that I get like paid, just talk and help these guys with their things. And suddenly at other times it's like, now this thing that I'm really passionate about, now it just feels like, I don't know, work or a problem to be solved. So there are ups and downs for sure. And I definitely understand why you think or go the way about it that you do. But just out of curiosity, what did kind of the growth of the channel look like?
So the growth of the channel is really hard for me to document simply because I did not know about the YouTube Studio tool for the first 2 years. So I
Mm,
had no idea you can sort of like follow the growth and like watch how many views. I didn't care. I had no idea how many views the videos got. I would release them and that's it. I really remember one of the first video I made that went viral was a video about pull-ups. And I say viral, it got like 70K views. But back then it was like 100 times what I used to make. And I remember not even noticing because it just went viral and I didn't pay attention to the tool. And frankly, I returned to that because this is when I was the happiest. I would just make content for the sake of making content and not waiting to be pat on the back by YouTube or like through like this gratification that is completely empty and void. But so that was the start of the channel, and I feel like the start of a really big break was when Alex Leonidas got me on his channel, and the interview and podcast got really popular. And so a lot of people started coming in. And the video I put out right after that went viral, where it got like 300K views. And that was a guts program. So this is when like the influx started. And YouTube, for better or for worse, is all momentum based. As long as you have momentum with you and the algorithm likes you, you can put out a video of you petting a cat and it will get views. It's a stupid system. It's a system that they put in place to make more money. It is the way it is. You can't fight it. But that's how it really started to snowball. And within 3-4 years, I was close to 100K subs. And once I got these 100K subs, I realized, like, first, wow, I never thought I would get that. And two, I realized this doesn't make me happy. So, like, the little plaque that YouTube sends you, I threw it in the garbage. It's like, why would I need that? It's stupid. What I like is the community that I've built and the help that I've been able to provide people. And so since then, I've just been floating around, making the videos that I want, not really caring if they're popular or not. Like, and sometimes this is the reason why I don't want to monetize. I have this idea of a video that I know is going to take me a lot of time and effort that will not be popular. And if I was commercially oriented, I would not make that fucking video. But because I'm not, I can do it. So last year I made a Dune video that's almost 4 hours long that took me more than 100 hours to make. That was a complete failure, but who cares? It made me very happy and a few people liked it. So I'm good with that. I want to conserve that. So whatever I do around it to be able to put food on the table will always be in the pursuit of preserving that, because this innocence to me is very important.
Yeah, no, I completely get that. And it's kind of good for me to hear right now, actually, because, long story short, I was on a trip. I ended up getting sick, and I was really prepared to go home and make a lot of videos, and I just didn't feel in the space for it. But, if this is my channel that I just put out stuff when I want to, then it doesn't matter. But when it feels completely like a job, it feels so much like, oh, no, I'm failing. I should be putting something out. So, yeah, no, this is just kind of, it gives me some food for thought, some things to think about going forward. But how big is the channel now?
I don't really know, maybe 130K, something like this.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, you're right about the momentum. In my case, I had 5 years. I got 1,000 subscribers per year. And then I had this old video. Of course, a video called What Being Ripped Taught Me About Women went viral. I think it has 500,000 views now or something. But that video going viral, that was not the only thing happening. Like I got comments and likes and more views on everything all the time, and just dopamine just exploding in your brain. However, something I've learned from life is this hedonic treadmill phenomenon. So I knew that, okay, this is not going to last forever. But still, there came a moment, like after a few months, when it's like, nothing's happening. Where's all the comments? But because I was prepared, I kind of caught myself. But yeah, I noticed it. I've been riding this wave for some time this year. It's been great. It's been a lot of fun. But yeah, definitely slowed down recently. But okay, so I have many things here. I've written down everything. I'm not sure we're not going to get to everything, but I wanted to extract pretty much like knowledge from you about training for our audiences, but my audience too. And I made a poll where I just asked, like, what shape are you in? What level are you at, basically, to my audience? I got like 900 people responding. And so 45% put themselves as beginners, 31% intermediate, 17% I don't even lift. Complete disgrace, guys. Come on, it's time. Get started. 7% so they're advanced. So mostly beginners and advanced. So I thought maybe we can go through a little bit. So on some kind of general level, because we can get into, like, we can talk about the forearms and neck trainings in detail, I'm sure. I want to start with this sort of a bit more general advice for these guys. So let's say you're the guy that doesn't even lift, and we try to come up with some. It's like a guy early 20s, average shape, which I guess these days is a little bit under muscled, a little bit too much fat. What would you tell a guy like that? If he has everything at his disposal, he can go to the gym and everything. What would you tell him to do to start?
Okay, first I would tell the guy to not become overzealous and to train as infrequently as possible. Because when you get started in reality, you can do 2 45-minute sessions a week and still get tremendous progress. I always tell people who get started, novices, 3 times a week, 1-hour sessions. You will get all of your gains from that. Is it possible to train 6 times a week as a novice? Yes, it's possible to train 15 times a week as a novice. The question is, how do we plan for your future? Because right now you're a tadpole and you're not that impressive, and tadpoles are a dime a dozen. My goal when I'm talking to a novice is, what are you going to be like as an advanced lifter? Because this is when things start becoming interesting. To me, the path really starts to open when you're advanced. Novice and intermediate, you're just like getting through the ringer, and it's a filter in a sense, because very few people make it through these filters, but they're not even the first steps, which is the reason why it's so terrifying and sad. So to make sure you make it through the filter, we keep you low frequency so that we can keep the fire going. There is nothing worse than a novice burnt out. It makes no sense. You're going to get to a point where you're going to need that frequency. You're going to need these 2-hour sessions to progress. Right now, you don't. So write these newbie gains and do as much general strength or general hypertrophy as possible. Don't limit your training. Don't do only presses and pulls. That's stupid. You don't have to do a gazillion isolation, but I want to see isolation for the biceps, for the triceps, for the shoulders, for the calves. 3 sets a week. That's it. That's enough because it'll build up. Between a guy who does 3 sets of tricep isolation a week for 3 years and one that does none and only presses, the size difference and the work capacity difference once they become intermediate is night and day. So that's you as a novice. There's nothing else I would tell a novice. Not even diet advice unless they're really fat or really skinny. If you're just a normal person, eat as you've eaten. Don't buy all of these protein powders. Just train. Your body will respond to that. Then you become an intermediate and it starts becoming interesting. One, you should know what you like and what you don't like. So you should have lifts that you absolutely hate, and that's fine. You should start to understand that maybe I'm more into strength, hypertrophy, maybe more athleticism. Doesn't matter. It's your path. You get to pick, but you need to know. If you're intermediate and you don't yet know what you want from this gym thing and you just do it, the results are going to be underwhelming and you're going to be a forever intermediate. You don't have to become like a bodybuilder or a powerlifter, but you have to have an inkling of what you like. And then you start to skew your training towards this. As an intermediate, this is when we can start putting you on programs that are a bit more interesting. So maybe an upper lower 4 times a week, maybe a push-pull leg arm. Maybe you can go high frequency. You can maybe go full body 2 times a week with a lot of volume. You can start to experiment and play around. What doesn't change is that your progression should continue. This is also the time where if you made the mistake of not counting your reps or not having rep ranges before and you relied on weight on the bar, you can no longer do that. It's not possible. Now you have to have rep PRs. Most of your PRs are rep PRs at this point. And this is going to destroy the intermediate plateau that many people run into, where they max out on bench and they're like, what do I do now? You count your reps, which you should have done from day one. But that's intermediate. And in truth, being an intermediate is pretty great because you still make tremendous progress, especially if you're the type that just ate whatever and you've never really properly bulked, and you properly bulk for the first time and you'll see your gains explode again. You can also start to put more emphasis on the muscles that you neglected. So like form isolation, real delts, that can start to come into play. You can start earlier. It's not necessarily needed, but early intermediate is when you can start doing that. And you should ride that intermediate wave for 3, 4, 5 years. And it should also just be a great time. The gym at this point should not be an obsession. It should just be part of your life that makes it better. Then you become advanced. And now we're starting to have a really good time because now you have huge work capacity. Your body is pretty muscular. You look better than 90% of people. And you're going to get even more because now you're going to enter the territory where people are going to start to look at you. And once you get that, you notice. People ask, how do I know when I'm advanced? Is it 3-plate bench? No, it's when people in the gym ask you if things around your person belongs to you. It's what I call the ayut, the ayut effect. Are you using this? I will be in the gym, an empty gym, because I like to go when it's empty, and I will have people approach me and say, hey, this lat pull down machine that's like 10 feet away from you, are you using that? Clearly, I'm not, but they feel the need to ask me because I'm the biggest guy around. That's a great feeling, knowing that there's even more to get from there. So for people who are advanced, my advice is now you should know exactly what lifts work for you, the ones that don't work for you. Your program should be a list of your favorites, no lifts that you don't enjoy. It should be the most fun you've ever had in the gym because now it's just extra on top of what you already have. And this is when you can start becoming a bit weird, where I do program reviews on my channel, and sometimes I have people who link me these programs who are like nonsensical with like all of these exotic movements out of a wazoo with all of these lifts and like all of that volume. And I'm like, wow, you must look like Ronnie Coleman. Then I look at their body and they're like this. I'm thinking, okay, well, you are going to be a novice forever because you got just brainwashed by some YouTuber telling you needed that. There is nothing that makes me sadder than when I go into the gym and I see a skinny guy doing cable work with 10 pounds and a slow tempo. And it's like, you will be doing that for the next 10 years. You will not put a pound of muscle on your frame because you are doing something that an advanced lifter would do because they have to refine their approach. I get to do these weird lateral raises with only 70 pounds with a cuff, with a slow tempo, because I'm already big enough to justify that. So that's the advanced stage. Well, now you're going to have exotic movements in your program. You're going to have your own way of doing them. So you're going to press in a way no one presses, do triceps in a way no one does, because you know it works for you. And this is the part and the point where you have truly become an individual. This is why lifting is part of individuation, because you will start by copying what other people tell you to do, and then eventually come into your own and have your own method. And if you even take it a step further, you might even start teaching people that method to get them to the same stage that you are now, which is an individual. So that's where I am, that's where you are, and then we have yet to discover the next stage.
Wow, that's a great summary. I don't have too much to add to that, but I think the thing I'd like to just confirm or validate or whatever is how little you really have to do when you start. Because I'm so used to that too, whether it's a client of mine or just guys in my life, they want to start and want to do so much, you know. First of all, you don't have to. Like, that's the thing. That's what I think is kind of beautiful now when I've done the trial and error and done, like, definitely did way too much early, overtrained many times, that I know that, no, bro, you don't even have to do all that much. Like you said, 3 full body workouts, that's like more than enough for a complete novice. But I've seen, I think about some guys I know in real life that start, they do push-pull legs every day pretty much. They do that for a month and they're super happy. Then they go out on a bender and drink or something. Now they're like completely hungover. Now they went off that routine and now like they threw it all away. But if you can stick to, it's like really quality over quantity. And I think that's true, well, with many things, but with training in general. Like, you don't really have to do that much. Just be consistent, keep doing it, high quality, improve upon that. Then when you get to intermediate advanced stage now, you're actually going to be doing quite a bit of quantity as well. But I agree with you too, that what I tell, honestly, people that start the diet part, it's more like, well, if you can think about just improving your diet, you know, eat more like real foods, decent foods, have some kind of awareness about protein, you know, you don't really need much more than that. But let's talk a little bit about diet for bodybuilding, because I think I know what your kind of take will be on this. But how much does diet matter for bodybuilding?
So first, let's begin with the obvious. Diet is not 80% of bodybuilding. Whoever
Hmm.
said that was either on drugs or not really in tune with how important training is. Training is 80%. Because if you look at it from the standpoint of fuel versus vehicle, the diet is the fuel. The training is the vehicle. If I tell you what's more important, the car or the oil that runs it, it's the car. Because if you have just the oil, you're not going to go very far with it. It's the machinery that uses the oil that you have to pay attention to. So this is important because I keep seeing people who have these perfect diets and then their training schedules are total garbage and they wonder why they're not making gains. Because you have all of the fuel in the wood, but you're not driving anywhere with it. So why do that? Someone who eats garbage randomly and who trains really intensely is always going to outdo someone who has a perfect diet and who doesn't train well. This is true up until the point of a bodybuilding competition when it's about conditioning, which concerns 0.001% of lifters. So it's not that relevant. So that's for, in a sense, the misconception. After that, when it comes to protein, for example, I'm a big believer that protein is vital for building muscle, but it's way overblown. Where you see the amounts recommended, someone like me is recommended something insane, like 200 or like 300 grams of proteins. I don't even come close to that. And I've never had any issues putting on muscle. It must also be recognized that it might be a genetic predisposition. Some people might need more protein than others, and it's really a game of experiments. I always tell people this. When I started lifting, I was the guy that would never, ever skip his scoops because I was a rich piano fanboy. It's shake time, goddammit. I would have my shakers morning, noon, and night. I would get so much protein. And it cost me tremendous amounts of money. And it was also a bother to have to like down these shakes all the time. But I told myself, hey, this is for muscle gain. And then eventually I just got lazy and I stopped doing that. And what I found was that there was no difference. I was making the same progress, the same progressive overload. I was getting stronger at the same rate. And so I was thinking, okay, so I essentially just spent years just like wasting money, drinking things that did nothing. And I'm not claiming it destroys your kidneys because it doesn't. It's used as energy. But you could use carbs as energy. It's much, much cheaper. So why not do it? This is when I started to like rethink the way I dieted. And I realized, hey, I always do better with high carb diets. So why not just do that? Why? Because it's going to make me fat, but I'm not fat. So let's do that. And this is an experiment that I want everyone to do because you're going to find out that what you eat and the way you eat is different from the other guy and that this is optimal for you and it's not optimal for him. So that's that. And then the last part is you don't want your diet to become this thing that obsesses you. Like I know people who like they weight everything and calories this and this has this amount of macros and it becomes almost an eating disorder where it might be needed for like the top bodybuilders, but for the average guy who wants to build muscle, it's just overblown. And it connects to something that you've said where people start training and they do way too much, way too fast, and they burn out. It's the same. It's a quirk of self-improvement that it's a type of self-sabotage where you go in and you do too much, you burn yourself out spiritually and mentally, and then you give up. What is the point of waiting off your food for a month and then binging for 11 months? Why not have a clean, balanced diet for the rest of your life that is easily sustainable, that will get you the same gains? To me, this is a much more common sense approach to bodybuilding that needs to make a comeback.
No, 100%. And well, I think it's a little different because I have some clients that, I'm into fasting, which we can talk about that later, maybe. But because of that, some people that struggle with like food addiction and stuff have found me. And then I think it's a little different because now we're not talking about like what is necessary in order to make bodybuilding goals. It becomes a sort of behavioral change. But I guess what I wanted to get at is that, diet matters. But like you said immediately, the diet is not 80%. I think the analogy is almost like what matters most for being able to drive a car, like driving skills or having fuel in the car. It's like, well, you got to be able to drive. Like, it doesn't matter if you have the best car, the best fuel, whatever. You got to be able to do the thing. I think it's amazing actually that someone even thinks like, yeah, you can have kind of mediocre training. Just eat the right foods, though. That's what makes the muscles just grow like that. But a little question about just your diet. Like, what kind of does your diet look like?
So first, I eat very little. People would be shocked to see how little I eat. And that's
Hmm.
because I have a very slow metabolism. So whatever my organs have going on, they clearly don't require much. So I don't know if this is an indictment on my brain or lung capacity, but I can eat in the ballpark of like 2,500 calories and maintain a body weight of 220 pounds
Hmm.
easily. I also don't really get super hungry, so I'm always very balanced. If I want to gain weight, I eat an extra bowl of rice. If I want to lose weight, I just subtract that bowl of rice, and that is pretty much that. A day of diet for me would be waking up. I have breakfast around 9 or 10. Breakfast is very minimal, usually some bread, something sugary. I was raised with sugary breakfasts. You can take them from my cold hands. And I drink some oat milk, maybe with some protein in it, but that's it. Then I might have lunch at noon or 12, where it will be lots of carbs, so bread, naan, pasta, rice, some sauce to make it less dry, some meat or no meat, or sometimes some eggs in minimal quantities. Then I'll have a snack at around like 4 p.m., maybe some, again, more bread, more carbs with some applesauce or something like this before my workout to have like that quick rush of sugar and glycogen in the muscle. I'll train, and after training, my dinner is the most voluminous. This is when I eat the most because this is when I'm really hungry. And
Mm.
oftentimes this will be again more rice with some chicken. I stay away from beef, but sometimes beef. My wife will make tofu or eat tofu together, like in a curry or something. And this is where I will really stuff myself. Before, throughout the day, I never want to be full because if I'm full, I get sleepy. And to me, it
Mm.
hits me like a truck and then I can't do anything.
Yeah.
But after dinner, it's fine to get sleepy. You can use it to go to sleep earlier. And that's pretty much my diet. I never
Mm.
overthink this. I eat the same things times and times again. I'm a pretty decent cook, so most of what I eat, I cook myself. I don't use a microwave. I only use ovens and pans, and this has been a fairly easy way for me to keep building muscle. And this is the way I bulk. Now, I understand that for many people, this would be their cut. So
Hmm.
I'm not going to like give advice for that. I know that many people really struggle with the bulk. I'm blessed in that for me, the bulk is very, very easy to maintain.
Mm. Yeah, that's funny. I wouldn't think that you eat so little. I have the opposite problem that some people would think is a luxury again, because some people they want to be able to eat a lot, but I pretty much I have to force feed at this point to like when I start the bulk, it can be a bit enjoyable to eat a bit more, but after a while I just feel like I just have to push all this food. If I have a few days where I don't know, just get up to 3,000 or something, I immediately see the scale drop. And the thing you mentioned that I hate is like the productivity factor. Productivity goes down so much when I have to eat like this. It's kind of an interesting thing. Again, I don't quite want to get into fasting yet, but just since that's something I do, and I actually like, I find it quite enjoyable, like both on a daily, like an intermittent fasting, just put off breakfast until later, and doing these longer fasts. So it's kind of an interesting position to be in, to like enjoy fasting, but also being a bodybuilder that wants to eat a lot and put on muscle. Were you going to say something there? Or?
No, it's interesting that we all have these inclinations and we always want what we don't have. So you will
Mm,
have people who have like you not much appetite who need to eat more who are like, well, I wish I wasn't that. And then you have the people who have that crazy appetite and who get way too fat from it who say, oh, I wish I didn't have that. It's always
mm.
a question of finding out, what will allow you to keep going that also aligns best with what you want in life.
Oh yeah, like aren't we masters at that with like everything? I was talking to Atlas Power Shrugged was on the podcast, and we were talking about like genetics and the body. And when I was younger, I mean, the only time I got into bodybuilding the way I do it now, there at 25 after the panic attacks, but in my teens, I had like some ambitions of building muscle and getting in shape, and it was just that back then it was only about I want to look good for girls, basically, and that kind of motivation. Side note that never took me far enough because it was just all about something outside of me, not working on me and improving myself. But the point is, I was in decent shape as a teenager. I had, abs kind of looking like now. I guess I'm just all over way smaller. But if I were to look back, I was in pretty athletic shape, probably in better like muscular shape than most kids in that age. But because I had the four pack, very clear and visible. But I stubborn lower belly fat, and because I had that, in my view, I didn't have abs, and I saw some guys that had the full eight pack, and it's like, man, I want that. And then now these days, that's something people comment the most on, like your abs, they're so big, they're so chunky. And at this point, I do not care about that lower abs part, but it's just so funny that I was completely blind to that you actually have pretty decent abs. It's just, they come in different shapes and forms.
Yeah, well, this is genetics. This is why when people complain about genetics, it's always funny because they never instead are grateful for what they have. We
Mm,
always want what the neighbor has, that we have something that they don't. And it's the same with me, it's the same with everyone. Like I have great six-pack genetics. I carry no fat in my abs. So even at like peak bulk, I still have a six-pack. People are like, "Wow, that's amazing." I'm like, "Yeah, but I live with this every single day, so I don't care." Something that I
mm,
don't have, however, is good lower back genetics. That Christmas tree that you have is
mm.
very unattainable for me because I carry all of my fat there. So even though I have a lot of muscle there, I need to get really shredded to even see a inkling of that. will I obsess over this and now make it my like life mission to get that thing? I think it would be childish, and it would also be counterintuitive because I would lose on everything else to get that one thing just because I don't have it. Maybe wisdom is also realizing, hey, you don't have it maybe for a reason. It's because it's not
Mm,
aligned with your genetics and with what your body should look like. I think that
mm,
we can all build the body in the way we want, and that's great. But ultimately, there are certain goals that are much more achievable and much more realistic. So for me, V-tapers, tiny waist, physique like this, I can love them and find them inspiring, but I cannot be that because I'm
mm,
not built like that. I'm built like an ogre. I'm built like Hercules, much closer to the Farnese Hercules. The statue, if you look at it, has a giant waist, but no one ever comments on it saying, "Oh, what a big waist!" They're like, "Wow, what a unit." This is
mm.
more in line with what I can get, and so this is much more realistic. And for mental health and for bodybuilding, this is what I need to aspire to.
Mm, yeah, 100%. And what I've noticed that I tell some people I work with is because it's like, oh, do you think I can get rid of this? Or when I lose weight, do you think I'll have loose skin here or this body part? Many of these anxious kind of questions. And what I tell them is that, since the better shape I've gotten into, the more I've discovered like my asymmetries, my weaknesses. What's off? It's actually way more clear to me now. But I think it's the combination of just feeling good about yourself overall and just maturing in that way that you said that maybe there's a reason. Maybe you're supposed to look or have a certain body, and just to bring in something else even that I realized is some feedback I got. I interviewed my little brother, my autistic little brother, on this podcast, and a way I started looking at that because that was always presented as it's a problem. Something is wrong with him. And it's not to deny that it was very difficult, and he's gonna need some special assistance, but really that has a lot to do with a modern society. Really, he just functions in a way that in this overly structured society, it could be looked at as like a problem, but he just functions in a different way. Like a guy like him, if you just put him in a very simple task, he'd be like a workhorse. There's nothing wrong with him. He just functions a certain way. Same with our bodies. We have different strengths and weaknesses, and we have those for a reason. So I want to go on to you go by natural hypertrophy. So I gotta ask, aren't you at least a little bit tempted to take the steroids, go on take the whatever, go the dark path?
So I went through a period of my life in 2016, 17, where I was incredibly tempted to the point where I came that close to actually ordering steroids. And that was because I was bombarded with content at the time on YouTube Fitness that already started being open about steroid use, where they essentially openly promoted it. So it was 40 long minute video about like Deca, where this is all it's going to do for you, it's great, blah, blah, blah. Back then, unsurprisingly, because I was consuming content from these people, I already bought into the notion of a natural limit. And so back then, my physique was garbage, to be honest. I had imbalances everywhere, no lats, no triceps, no shoulders, no hamstrings. 50% of the body wasn't even started to develop. And I had bought into the idea that was it. That the only way forward was drugs. So I was like getting very close to like jumping on. And then I met people who did drugs because back then it's not like it is now where you tap Psalms on the internet and it's delivered to your door. Back then you had to know a guy. So you had to know a guy that would get the product for you. And the gym where I trained had a bunch of enhanced dudes. So I got closer to them. They took me under their wings and we started to like see each other and train together. And this vaccinated me from PED use for the rest of my life because I saw the truth. I saw the things that enhanced bodybuilders, enhanced influencers refuse to show because it's not glamorous. I saw what's behind the rainbow and the sunshine. I saw the mood swings. I saw the depression. I saw the suicidal ideation. I saw the horrible psychological effect of gaining weight and losing weight, where I had a friend who discovered orals. So he started a Debo cycle and he blew up. Like realistically, he became massive and he was all happy and puffy, like around the gym and like showing off. And then he disappeared. And I didn't see him for 2, 3 months. And when he came back, he had lost all of his size and some. He was smaller than he used to be. He had joint problems now. And I remember him just going around the gym like a lost puppy, doing a few tricep extension and like holding his elbow like, oh, that hurts. And I looked at it like, wow. So for 3 months of being Mr. Big, now you fucked up your relationship with training, which is vital forever. I will never do this. And then the Grim Reaper also knocked on the door several times where I lost 4 of these friends. They died before they reached their 40s. And these were guys who were not like sickly. They were doing perfectly fine in the gym, benching 4 plates. And then one day you get a call and it's like, yeah, he had a heart attack, he's gone. When you get through that, when you see what it's really like to take these products, unless you're a complete idiot, you should stop. And this is when I was like, okay, this is not the path, clearly. So what is the other path? And this is when I discovered natural bodybuilding. And I realized, okay, it must be possible naturally to have a good body, to be physically fit, and to keep improving. How do I do that? You know, you said something earlier in the podcast where you said, at some point, I stopped looking at what is possible and I just did it. I just did it. And if I keep growing, if I improve, good. If I don't, who cares? That's exactly the way. That is natural lifting. You just do it. Who cares if this guy says, oh, there's a limit? Okay, I'll see with my own 2 eyes. Let me go check out that so-called limit. I'm still looking for it. I don't know about you. I'm looking high and low for that limit. I still haven't found it. So once you realize that, and this takes a long time, you have to wait until you're like late, intermediate, advanced. Once you realize that, you realize, well, I can keep going like this. Steroids become the fourth choice. Why would I do that? I can keep my health, I can keep my good looks, my good skin, my hair, and keep growing. Why would I do that? And suddenly it's no longer you looking at PED users as an envious person being like, oh, I wish I had that. Now I look at them with pity and I'm like, you made a horrible choice. I would never in a million years trade my life with yours. And I think that this is also the position that allows for the best advocacy of natural lifting. I know natural lifters who preach the natural way, but you can tell they're dying to do PEDs. It doesn't work. People see through it. But if you are in a high position of superiority, or you say, no, we are right, we are the correct path, come with us and you'll see, don't make that mistake. This works. I've had hundreds of testimony of men telling me, hey, I was this close to jump on. I listened to your videos and I was like, okay, let me give it a try. And now I will never do it. That's a win. That's natural hypertrophy.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's awesome. I love that when people reach out with comments like that. Yeah, I was on the brink, but because it is so interesting. Actually, it's funny when you're on this side, like, of course, you understand that some people are skeptical, like, are you really natural? And that, but I feel the same way you do. Like, why would I? No, I don't want to. Like, how much do I get paid to take these steroids? You're talking like, it's like, why would I? And I think for me, I never truly considered it because I came into this again, all from this like be rock bottom, okay, I gotta build up my health, sort of finding bodybuilding on the way that, when I approach this in a sort of self-development, self-care kind of way, I actually got these sort of bodybuilding results as a sort of side effect almost. And then I could start focusing more on that. But it always came second to just self-improvement, me feeling good. And of course, steroids doesn't fit too well in that picture. But of course, like when you start training, you're starting, what is even possible? Again, also, I feel like YouTube fitness or the fitness industry, it's kind of geared towards like, making you think that nothing is possible without steroids and that you should take them because like I'm sure that you feel that you are too. Like I see myself as very much a free thinker. I've never been a conformist. I've never just bought into something because everyone else does it. But I felt like what was presented to me when I tried to learn about fitness, like really like put these seeds in my head that maybe it's not that bad. Like TRT, like all these things. And I'm also so happy that I decided, because I think I'm just like having these little temptations, but I knew deep down, like, this is about health. I don't want to be committed to something like that at the expense of my well-being, And then you get past it and you realize, so much was possible naturally. I dodged a bullet. Like, I'm so happy. And I definitely never want to do that. But let me see. I had something related to this. Oh yeah, you mentioned like genetics. So let's talk about that too. Like, so if you have really bad genetics, how about then? Wouldn't you understand that someone starts considering hopping on?
Well, we first have to define what bad genetics is, because the majority of people think they have bad genetics. And the reality is that it's not that, it's that they have bad training regimens. I have a characteristic, a power, I would say, that I've developed through years of going to the gym, where I can look at someone's body and pretty much detect their potential. Where I've been able to look at a guy who has no traps and tell him, watch out. In 2 years, if you keep just doing rows and whatever, and you keep training your back the way you are, your traps are going to be overpowering. Never fails. The guy comes back 2 years later, no lats or traps. It could be attachment, it could be instinct, it could be luck. I don't know. But I can tell you that oftentimes when people tell me I have bad genetics, I look at their body and I say, no, you have bad training regimen, you have bad discipline, you have bad diet, but you don't have bad genetics. You can say you have bad genetics after 10 years of training. Give me 10 years of dedicated training for bodybuilding and hypertrophy, then come back to me. These people exist. I know people who have, for real, been dedicated and their results are really underwhelming. These people can say, I have bad genetics. But you know what the interesting thing that I found is? None of them ever told me I want to take steroids. Not one. They all tell me I want to keep improving what I have. Every time someone tells me I want steroids to be able to have better improvement with my genetics, it's always people with average genetics or above average who are, for some reason, spoiled and entitled, thinking I deserve more. Because that is what steroids is. Steroids is saying nature cheated me and I deserve more. So I'm going to inflate what I was given. To me, that's very childish. And it's not surprising that the majority of people who jump on steroids are young. The myth and this idea that was promoted when we were watching this type of content, that everyone who does steroids has put in their 10 years, it's guys in their 30s who cannot make gains anymore. That's nonsense. It's not replicated by the stats. In the US, the majority of people who do steroids, their first cycle is between the age of 16 and 21. That's the overwhelming majority. These people are novices to early intermediate, never more. So once we see that, it's important to reclaim that question of genetics, because the question of genetics was weaponized to encourage people to turn their back to the natural way. Give your genetics a chance. This is what I always say. Oftentimes, you have betrayed your genetics and not the other way around. For me, if I were to give you an example, for a long time, I thought I had bad lats genetics. Why? Because I'm someone who is trap dominant. So when I do a row, my traps do everything. To grow my lats, I have to do movements with an open elbow or a very close elbow where I really stretch the lats, etc. And ever since I started training like this, now my lats actually connect low enough for me to realize, oh, you never had bad genetics, you had bad lats training. The best example that pretty much anyone can relate to is calves. How many people will tell you they have bad calves genetics? Pretty much every single person that ever speaks about the topic. Why? Because no one trains them properly. So everyone has small calves, so everyone thinks they have bad calf genetics. But how would it make sense for a species to have the majority of their representative, their male representative, all have bad genetics for one muscle group? It's not possible. So it must come from somewhere else, which is the training. And the more we talk about genetics, the more we realize that it really doesn't matter. It starts to really matter when you're at this super high level where like this insertion starts to matter and your ability to like put mass here matters. But for the majority of people, you can just ignore that topic altogether and you'll be better off.
Yes, exactly. It's a stoic idea, kind of, focus on what you can control, like your genetics, like spending way too much time thinking about what is that going to help you really. And I think that's a good point. You say that some people that actually truly have bad genetics, that they were never the people that express that, oh, I want to hop on PEDs, because it seems to be like people that, like we, again, how human beings do, we try to justify our behavior. I want to take a shortcut, nothing's happening, I'm impatient. Well, look, I have bad genetics. It's just fair to give me a equal, chance. I need to hop on. So yeah. No, completely agree. Like the genetics, it's interesting. Just that this you mentioned the lats. I just wanted to tell you, I never thought of it as me having bad lat genetics, but that's another thing. This is something I find incredible and so interesting with the journey of natural bodybuilding, that at least to me, many times I felt like, I definitely know what I'm doing now. Like, not saying that I've learned everything, but I know what works now and what kind of doesn't. I know my process. And every once in a while, I will hit something like, oh, this area, it actually doesn't work. Or like, I'm just stuck at this exercise. Point is, I will find some new little aspect. And most recently, it was lats for me too. I found for me personally, just since you mentioned that it's these like more diagonal angles that work really well. So L-sit chin-ups have been great for me. Like, I've been weighting them too. And then there's this seated row machine with a high cable. When I really pull low there, I can already see difference in my lats. But the point is, I could also have said, like, oh no, poor, I have bad lat genetics. We have done all these different pulls. But when I actually had a bit of a, scientific mindset like that. Okay, what does the lats do? What haven't I really tried? Turns out I didn't really have, just like you said, bad lat genetics, but bad lat training. Not my training didn't work well for my lats. So, yeah, people wanted me to ask you about physique goals. So, kind of your current stats, so your height, your weight, but also kind of what are you working on right now?
So I'm 6 feet without shoes. Very important to say.
Mm,
Because I've met people who are like, well, you're taller than you're supposed to be, is because, yeah, I have shoes. You're not
mm.
supposed to measure yourself with shoes. It doesn't make much sense.
It's the Americans, right? They're weird about their height. They lie about it, and yeah. Mm.
Yes, it's an experience that I've had a lot here where I will meet people who will tell me, oh, I'm 5'10", 5'11", and they'll be like, here. And I'll look at them like, do I bust your bubble? Sometimes I'm forced to, and it's always very awkward where they start and they state their height, and then I go and I say I'm 6 feet, and there's that silence in the room of the, like, someone here is lying, and I don't
Mm.
think it's the guy who's the tallest one. So that's a little bit awkward, but again, it's tough to blame them, especially in the fitness sphere where there's so much vitriol and hatred towards so-called short men. When in reality, for me, the best bodybuilding height is between 5'6" and 5'9". Like, you're golden if you're within that. Anything more than that, you're starting to become too tall, where it becomes more and
Mm.
more difficult. So people glorify this 6 feet plus thing for bodybuilding, not the move. So
Mhm.
I'm 2020, 6 feet 2020, which is I'm fairly high body fat. So this is not really coming close to like a realistic lean weight for someone my height. I have a very narrow frame. So I have the frame of a 5'8" guy on a 6 feet guy. So I have a torso and legs that are exactly the same length. I have a wingspan of 6 feet, so no long arms, very narrow clavicles. So that makes me much more condensed and packed. So for example, my chest, if I put on some mass, it looks gigantic because it's just distributed on such a small area. But
Mm.
the issue with this is that my shoulders and my width is not that impressive. So traps will look huge, and then the lats that go around the shoulders don't look that big. So I walk around these things towards what my goal physique is, which is the Berserker physique. And the
Yeah.
Berserker physique is huge legs, as big as you can get them. There is no limitation. Posterior chain huge, big obliques, because you have a big waist, so why not have big obliques on top of that? A very developed core, big chest, limb dominant, so the biceps especially need to be bigger than the shoulders.
Mm.
Shoulders developed, but less than the rest. Big traps and decent lats. That's more or less the picture that I'm going for, that I'm always striving towards. And then there are small arrangements that I had to make along the way. So for a long time, I ignored shoulders completely. But I've gotten to a point where my arms are still growing. And so if I allow my shoulders to stay the same size, it's going to look ridiculous. So now I'm working on getting the shoulders slightly bigger to match the upper limb, but the upper limb still needs to be dominant. One thing that I did not notice is forearms. Likewise, for the Berserker physique, you cannot get too big of forearms. It's not possible.
Mm.
Especially if you are tall like me, the taller you are, usually the more the ratio of your forearm bone to your bicep bone humerus tends to be skewed towards forearm. And so it's going to look lanky. So you have to pack on mass. We don't have a choice. What I'm focusing right now on is my weak area of the triceps. For
Mhm.
a long time, I attempted to do it with like French press, with a dumbbell, and with like all of these like isolation skull crushers, and I always ran into elbow issues. And ever since I've joined the commercial gym, I've found out and realized that the Smith machine and the cables are your best friends to develop your triceps. And so I've started to really see good gains here. Likewise with the shoulders, I used to be an overhead press guy with a barbell. Come to find out, for me, it doesn't grow my shoulders that much because I run into plateaus. So now I use the Smith machine, and I'm also a huge believer in dips. I started doing them weighted a year ago, and I regret not ditching bench press and overhead press much earlier for dips because I was fearmongered by people saying dips are super dangerous and your shoulder is going to explode and
Mm.
your pecs are going to detach. I've had 15 times more shoulder issues with bench press than with dips. I've never had any discomfort with dips, so this is now my lift of choice. And my goal going forward is maintain that body weight because I'm at such a high body fat degree that there is no real point in adding more weight. So I'm going to maintain at 220 pounds for a while and just
Mm.
bring up these areas via just performance increase, volume increase. And then in a year or 2 years, maybe reassess and see where I'm going. In terms of measurements, both arms are above 18 inches. My left one is bigger because the bicep, for some reason, might have some like myostatin deficiency. I don't understand why it keeps growing. And the right one is struggling behind. So now I have one bicep that's significantly bigger, even though it gets the same amount of volume. My legs have reached 28 inches. So I'm very happy with that.
Yeah, I
Uh,
saw.
I want to go to 30 inches because like I've started to introduce split squats and they just grow like weeds. And since I'm not the type of guy who wants this like upper body dominant aesthetic with like these like very aesthetic and pretty legs,
Mm.
I want two tree trunks below my body, and that's pretty much what I'm going for. So this is the picture that I have in my mind. And I think that visualization is huge. So, for example, when I see people who train in gyms and they have posters of their goal physiques, I think that's big because to constantly see what you want to look like makes it much easier to manifest and create it in real life. It's much easier to focus on your goal and to not get lost. Like you've mentioned, unfortunately, you always feel like, oh, I've got it like covered. I know everything. Then you
Yeah.
realize, wow, I've been doing something wrong for so long. This makes it easier to not do that because you're focused on the goal.
Mm. Interesting. I think it's interesting because I know you and many people have like a sort of clear goal physique, and I've never had that. And I think it's just at the time, I'm just like, man, I'd really like to bring this area up. But like what I'm thinking is just like, well, I'll just make everything bigger, right? That's what I try to do. But I have the opposite problem with the arms and shoulders. I'd say that shoulders, I think it's what I focus the least on, but I'd say I have pretty good shoulder development. The most difficult muscle for me has always been the biceps. I don't know what it is. Like everything else, when I put my mind to it, like now the lats, okay, I wasn't lat dominant, but I found a way pretty quickly when I tried to. The biceps, I just have not found the formula yet. It's like they've grown during these years, but very, very slowly. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this really, but I think it's interesting that almost all other muscles, I feel like I can see a pretty straight path forward with how it's going. Yeah, okay, yeah, I matched my reps to last time, but this time I added a rep, like pretty straightforward like that. Biceps is the one muscle I can show up and like, I lost 4 reps on this curl and I have no idea why. So still working on that formula.
I will give you three potential paths.
Oh,
Because
please.
I've spoken to people who have this issue, and as someone who is ultra bicep dominant, I've managed to quote unquote fix it in some people. And maybe
Mm-hmm.
people who are listening have the same problem and they might try and apply it. Number one, I found that some people who insist on trying to grow their biceps through supination isolation actually would grow them best via pronation. So instead of constantly trying to like have your palm facing up when you do your exercises, you can keep it slightly angled here. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have to be fully pronated and get too much forearms, but you can be slightly here. And this position tends to recruit more bicep and be more comfortable for many people. So if you have, for example, an easy bar, that's the position it puts your hands into. You're here. So that can be something you try. The second one is the exact difference, which is people who don't supinate enough and who don't exaggerate the supination enough. And you see that oftentimes with people who do incline curls, where they'll go down and their hands will pronate and they will end the movement here instead of keeping that supination going. For these
Mm.
people, the fix is easy. You use a force grip so that you cannot pronate through your thumb and you insist on keeping that pinky toe up. And that way, you can cheat yourself because if you start to lose that supination, you'll see it. So that's one potential new path. And then the third path, and this is the rarest one, I would be very surprised if it was you. Some people actually grow best from pulls. So doing their rows supinated, doing their heavy chin-ups weighted, doing all of their like lat pull downs supinated, all of that tends to feed their bicep as much as it feeds their back. So if one of these three areas looks like something you've never attempted, it could be a try.
So it's definitely not the third one because I've done a lot of heavy pulling, like, weighted supinated chin-ups. I think my personal best from a dead hang to all the way up here was with 3 plates, and I was like 82 kilos at the time, and I've done like good rep sets, and I was always hoping it would be a biceps compound for me, but clearly not so much. But just so I understand this middle one there, you talk about the pinky. So are you talking about being in the supinated position like throughout the entire range of
Yes.
motion then? Yeah.
Yes, because this is this is usually the golden standard for training your biceps. And people say, yes, I stay supinated. But then you look at their arms and they're really not. They like pronate. And it's a natural tendency, because when you're fully supinated and your arm is fully stretched, there's a lot of tension on the bicep. So instinctively, you tend to like pronate into it so as to stretch more of the brachioradialis and reduce the risk on the bicep tendon. That's fine. Actually, it's a natural reaction. But if you do it with less weight and with a good tempo, like with incline curls, for example, and a good incline, you'll find that if you like really exaggerate that supination, the sensation at the bottom and when you reverse that movement feels purely bicep, where it almost feels like you don't have a forearm. You have a hand that is directly attached to the humerus. And I know for a fact that many people report when they do incline curls, they get a forearm pump. They feel like their forearms take over, and that's because they pronate into it.
Yeah, no, because my brachioradialis has decent development even before I ever did like a reverse curl or something. So it's possible there's something to that. Well, thanks. I'm going to keep that in mind. I wanted to. Let's see. I'm sorry, I've written so many things down here. Like, where were we? Yeah, just a simple way, because I think this is a good way to kind of highlight what you. Let's put it this way. You know, when people want to prove something, they just look for proof that it's true. They do not really look for the opposite. For this reason, I like to ask, like beyond even just like beginner, intermediate, and that. It's kind of what would be the most common mistakes people do in the gym? Do you think when it comes to natural bodybuilding, like that keeps them from getting the results that they like?
Okay, well, 2 years ago, I would not have been able to answer that because I used to train only in a home gym. But I've spent so much time in a commercial gym now, and I'm so judgmental as a person that I have a lot of insights now on the average person, because I go to a gym that has a lot of like influx of people. And so I've seen with my own two eyes what the average gym goers does, and it made me realize why they're so small. So the number one thing I think is that, unfortunately, the prevalence of optimal content on Instagram in particular, that it's the worst offender, has completely brainwashed people into thinking that you can become huge off of baby weights and slow tempo. And that is not possible. Tempo is something that you add onto a weight that is hard to lift. It doesn't dictate the load. I'm seeing people use their tempo to say, okay, I can only use that tempo with 10 pounds, so 10 pounds it is. Horrible. Now you just destroyed any ability to progressively overload, because tempo is not a good metric to use to overload anything in the gym. And you're going to also lie to yourself thinking, well, that was hard, so it must work. It's hard because you made it needlessly difficult. You slowed it so much that it's hard. Of course, it's hard. If I give you a 10-pound dumbbell and I put it in your palm and I tell you, give me 15 reps with a 10-second tempo, it's going to be difficult, but you can do that for 100 years. You'll never grow from that. So that's the number one mistake. Tempo is something that helps you with technique, but something that should be used as a way to progress later, much later in your journey. After that, the prevalence of machines and cables. Machines and cables are not reserved for advanced lifters, but there is some value in learning how to move your body through space with calisthenics and free weights. It teaches you a lot about how the way your muscles work. I keep hearing people say, I use machines because that way I cannot mess up. And that's a loser's mindset. Okay, you cannot mess up, but you also cannot win. Machines have a very weird way of lulling you into a sense of progression that doesn't exist. Because one, they take care of most of the negative for you, so you'll never experience that stretch and that work that it takes to balance during the negative. And two, the load you can put on these machines is insane. Like I have an incline bench machine thing in my gym. I can put 3-4 plates on this thing. I cannot even come close to that on a free weight or even on a Smith machine. With the Smith machine, it's divided by 2. Why? Because the machine does most of the stabilization work for me. So I just can push through the axis and it's very easy. A beginner that got to a 3-plate bench on this would not see much gains from it because he's not using that machine properly. So that's number 2. And then number 3 is the insane techniques that I see some people use with crazy momentum, which is the exact opposite of number 1. But I'm seeing guys who seem to be so obsessed with the ability to move a lot of weight that they forget that the point is to move a weight through a distance. And that if you don't do that, the weight doesn't really matter. So when I see guys who do preacher curls with close to 100 pounds, which is really strong, like it's more or less what I use for sets of 12, and they're just here.
Mm.
And I look at that thinking like, who told you that you can progress like this? And usually these guys, that's the methodology for everything. So they will half rep everything. I don't see how this is possible in 2025 with so much information, but this is extremely common. So if you're a novice and you're not doing one of these three, you're already golden.
Mm. Yes, no, I agree. But there was one I thought you were going to say also, and then it's the effort, because honestly, that's what I see a lot, that people just don't train that hard. And I guess we can also talk about that, like just your stance on intensity and training to failure, because that's something I see, and I happen to like it a lot. Like, since it came almost from a fear of not doing enough for me when I started, that I'd better just do as much as I can. That way I cannot have done too little, right? Then I learned that sometimes I need to dial it back a little bit, but generally I like high intensity, and I see that a lot of people just cannot do that. So what do you think about that?
Well, it's interesting that you bring it up because I didn't even mention it because to me it's just obvious. Like it didn't
Hmm.
even register in my head for two reasons. One, because when I started training and I knew nothing about lifting, I had never watched YouTube fitness or anything, I was already going to failure because it appealed romantically to me the idea that for the muscle to get bigger and stronger, I have to push it until it cannot go anymore. And it doesn't make sense to me that other people don't come to this conclusion by themselves, that they would need someone to tell them you have to train to failure. Like that is a component of training. It's not even a method. It's just regardless of what you do, you have to go to failure. Then we
Hmm.
can negotiate with reps in reserve for lower body compounds. But for isolation, what is the upside of not going to failure on isolation? Less fatigue? Are you kidding me? Like that is an approach to training that is pretty pathetic and pretty wimpy. And you're right that this seems to be the majority of people. And worse than that, it would be a blessing if people kept reps in reserve. To keep reps in reserve, you have to even know what a reserve is, and you have to come close to it. It is impossible to distinguish in a commercial gym between someone doing a warm-up set and someone doing a walking set. It is impossible because oftentimes they'll do their set and they'll just stop. And there's that voice in my head that screams like, why did you stop?
Yeah.
There's only two valid reasons to stop a set. One, you went to failure. Two, you got hurt. Or maybe three, you got a phone call that your mom is in the hospital. That's three reasons. If you stop for any other reason, you're sandbagging your training, you're not going to get much progress. But yeah, that is the majority. And I think that this is because going to failure is hard. It's actually difficult. And two, because people don't really go to the gym to train. They go to the gym to tell themselves they're training. And they
Mm.
are doing what I call sets of exercises in between their sets of phones. So the gym where I go, people will rush through their sets as fast as possible, then stop randomly, and then boom, phone for 2 minutes. This is why you came. This is why you came to the gym for, to be able to be on your phone and have a good conscience. My gym manager approached me maybe 2 weeks ago and asked me, "Hey, why do I never see you on your phone?" And I told him it's because I have a strict no phone policy in the gym. I don't bring my phone. I'm focused on my sets. And he told me, well, you know what? You're the only person who does that because look around. And we looked around and everyone else was like this. These same people are going to go on Reddit and say, oh, I have bad genetics. No, you have horrible ethics. It's not your genetics.
Yeah. So, okay. So if I get you right, because there's a ton of these science-based kind of fitness content creators that, talk that you don't really have to train to failure. Is it even optimal? And that, so are you saying, Natural Hypertrophy, that you're not a science-based fitness influencer?
I would say that I'm anti-science-based fitness influencers, not anti-science. I see the value in science and repetition and being able to create subtract from a study. I also know that the majority of science-based influencers do not have the capacity to do that, are not interested in doing that because it's not marketable. The science-based content creator nowadays is a gimmick runner who understands that people's brain always go towards arguments of authority. These people 300 years ago would have been priests or they would have been gurus. They preach to a god just like they used to do. And they use arguments saying science says this as if it meant anything. Oftentimes don't even read their studies. This is my favorite game. When a guy says, study says this, I go and I read the study says the exact opposite. But good luck bringing it up because no one reads the study. So it's a foolproof method. In a way, I almost see that as a natural selection where the people who don't have what it takes to train hard and to really like go at it in the gym will just get filtered and they'll stay small forever. And this is Reddit lifting 101, by the way. There is a huge substract of these specific lifters that seem to be more interested in the theoretical aspects of lifting and learning everything there is to it, but they don't really care about doing it. And when you have arguments with these types, it's almost like talking to a wall. Like I remember talking to a guy who told me that because I didn't know the scientific name of every head of the bicep, then I couldn't give good bicep training advice. And I was staring at him like, okay, so the fact that I have big biceps is for nothing because I cannot name each head. So peculiar. And to be able to understand that logic, you need to be exactly like them. It's almost like a different species of man. So I don't think there is really a point in trying to get through to them. There seems to be a lot of pushback against science-based fitness, which is great. But these two groups are like oil and water that will never mix.
Completely. And I think what I try to tell people is like, why don't you go and apply the scientific method in the gym yourself? And then, of course, you can look at a study or follow certain science-based influencers to hear something about the latest study or whatever. But in the end, go to the iron laboratory yourself and you find out. And I can find, I guess, so I can find it a bit frustrating because what you just told me, to me, that's like a sign of like, this guy is smart, he's intelligent, he's thinking for himself, But for a lot of people, they, science, intellectual, smart, no, I'm smart, like that's anti-science, what you just said. So clearly you don't know what you're talking about. No, it's silly. I think it's a poison of, the modern times with the information society and YouTube, social media and all this. But I see it a lot, that a lot of, it's actually kind of what my latest YouTube video was about. A lot of people, I guess the point in my video was that a lot of people love to talk about things that they don't really have the results to show for, while some of us, we prefer to, like, we can talk a bit, but we're about doing the thing in the end. But I also think people confuse having heard people tell them things about how things work with actually knowing how they work, right?
Yeah, it's what you said. It's a quirk of modern society where, unfortunately, from a young age, you are encouraged to not do for yourself or think for yourself and just repeat. In the West, in particular, it used to be that critical thinking skills and interpretation was huge. It was valued above all else in your ability to get good grades. And we've since shifted in the 70s and 80s to a memorization-based system, where now the kids are rewarded for their ability to shut up and just repeat as is. You create a new type of man when you reward that type of behavior. And suddenly you get into a society where the free thinker becomes the enemy because he says, how about we think for ourselves? That is absolutely unacceptable for the hood. What do you mean think for myself? I spent 15 years not thinking for myself and I was rewarded for it. You are the problem and you are dangerous now. This is what we're seeing.
Yeah, because you said that, I gotta ask you, how did you feel about school?
Well, for me, I felt it was extremely frustrating. One, because the pace was horribly slow, because in France, for some reason, the teachers just aligned with the slowest kid. So these kids got to dictate the pace of the class, and most classes within 15 minutes had understood the entire subject. And I was like, can we move on? No, we had to spend 2 more hours because that kid is too dumb to understand it. And it was, to me, just like a waste of my time and insulting to me. And then there was also the fact that I was never really allowed to give my opinion because it was somehow going against the material, or do you think you know better? So for example, history. The way history is being taught is this happened, don't question it. And as a kid, I would be like, well, what about the implications? What about the political ramifications? Why did they do this? What does it mean for us? And I would have hoped to be rewarded for what I perceived to be intelligence, and instead I was punished times and times again. So I wasn't having a good time. And it wasn't because I was not doing well. I have a hyper strong memory. So for me, it was super easy to get good grades, but I also understood as I was just regurgitating all of the bullshit on the page that this wasn't making me smarter. I wasn't becoming more intelligent. I was becoming a more efficient drone and machine, but it's not what I wanted from school.
Mm. No, exactly. Like my experience with school was when I was younger. So let's say up to middle school, I felt that way, that this is so easy, you know, and I had always known that, okay, this is challenging for the other kids. For me, it's just like, it's quite easy. Then, you know, I was troubled in other ways. And then as soon as school switched to this kind of what you said, you just memorize the things by heart. You just shut up, be a good listener, understand what the teacher wants you to say, write it on a paper, and now you pass the exam. I started to struggle a bit more in school, but it's not really because, I mean, I guess I'm not very good at that, just sitting down and listening. But also, I think when you're a kid, you don't realize that some of your opinions about this situation is actually right, you know, because I know that I was thinking to myself at the time, why are we doing this? You know, like, how is this supposed to help me get a job or whatever, you know? And I could clearly see that these people that get the highest grades all the time, they're not the smartest. They just care the most about it and raise their hand and ask the most and study the most and memorize the best what's coming on the test, you know. And I felt like, because I could cheat the system, I felt like many times, like passing a test in the way it was not supposed to be, you know. Like, let's say there's one thing that comes to mind. There was a test, there were 40 questions that you can use to study for the test. The way I studied for the test is like, I look at the questions and like half of them are like, these are never going to come. These definitely come. These might come. And then I just focus accordingly, just knowing what the teacher is about. And then I show up and it's like, yeah, I kind of figured out what was going to come on the test. I passed this test, but for what? You know, I'm going to forget most of that. And I just felt like I used my problem solving skills and I felt like I cheated in like a legal way or something.
But that's what this system of education encourages, is that if you're smart enough, you can realize that there are many flaws in the system and you can game it to get very easy grades. So it's teaching you how to cheat. And, you know, I've
Mm.
had the exact same experience that you've had where we would take online quizzes and I would realize that, hey, if you go into the settings of the quiz, you can see all of the answers. So why don't I just go into the settings and pick out the right answers? None of the other kids thought about that. I had perfect grades. I had one teacher who had made the stupid habit of separating a piece of paper from the rest of the test, and that was half of the test. What would I do? I gave him half of the test, took the other page with me home, filled it up, and when he would come into the thing, I would slip my thing into his bag and I would be like, hey, you forgot to grade this. And I got the perfect grade. And you know, it turns you into a vicious misanthropic person because I was like, you're supposed to be an adult. You're supposed to be much smarter than me. How do I manage to game you every single time? It really is setting a bad example for young men and young women because if the adults in your life are part of a system that you find stupid and that they themselves are stupid, how are you supposed to want to take their place eventually?
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think in my case, again, I was troubled. I mean, I guess you had problems definitely too, but in slightly different ways. But, you know, what happened for me in my teens was in many ways, I don't, it's hard to remember. I just know that everything about school started just feeling very, just tough. I don't like it, you know. I think even the social part, because I have a very violent home. I fight a lot with my brother. But the point is that when I started like struggling in school a bit, now I get treated as the problem. You know, there's all these meetings, and it's like, well, Theo, he's not doing this and that. Like, how can we fix that kind of? And you know, even if you understand this is somehow to help me, that's what you kind of pick up on. Like, I'm the problem here. I'm messing up for everyone. And da da da. What I've ended up feeling, like, I'm not angry about it anymore, but I was angry for a while. Just like, man, I was a gifted kid, you know. Why was I like made to feel as if I'm a problem? Like I'm like retarded or something, you know? Like, of course, no one said that word, but no, it's unfortunate. I think about it sometimes. Like, what should you do? You know, because I understand that, you know, in a society, you have to try to make something that fits most people. But I see this a lot, that a lot of like really gifted and smart people end up like feeling or having the experience in school as if they're the opposite, you know?
There is a clear solution, and it's a solution that has always been put in place in Europe, at least, where there used to be gifted classes. Where if you had a
Mm.
kid that was seen as gifted, he was put with other kids gifted, and they would put on a fast pace, and they would do tremendous. And these would then turn out to become the elite of the nation. But we now live in a society that hates the idea of some people being better than others. And so it's trying to make everyone equal. But how do you make someone who's smaller than others equal? You can't. You cannot dumb them down. So instead, you have to mistreat them, destroy their potential, and then shrug your shoulders when these people turn out horrible. I know that for me, what made me leave France is that I realized that the system did not like people like me. And so I left for a country where I was constantly rewarded for my intelligence instead of punished. And it's the reason why when I turn back and I look back at my home country and I see the state it's in, I'm like, yeah, makes sense. You pushed out all of the smart people, and now you have the issues that results with a population that doesn't think for themselves.
Mm. Completely. Yeah, in many ways, I think of it that I feel like I don't fit in Sweden too well. Like, I know I look very Swedish, but just that mentality. But even because that's I guess something we can talk about. Like, even the girls here, I feel like I just don't connect really well with. And I guess I've thought about it because it's something I realized more recently. Like, I've been involved with girls these years, but it's never a Swedish girl, And when I try to think about why, I think, well, one thing is that they're so masculinized at this point, Like, even girls, and I would say, are like nice people and that, but they're so very indoctrinated in this sort of system, like even related to this school we talk about now, but very career oriented. And I feel like, let's put it this way. I feel like a good guy. Like, I'm confident about myself as a man. I just don't feel like that's appreciated so much around here,
Yeah, there is a possibility too that the more confident a girl becomes and the more she's able to stand for herself and by herself, the less she really needs a man.
Yeah.
And this has a name actually in philosophy. It's called heterofatalism, where a lot of women have realized, hey, I used to have to get that guy because without that guy, no bank account, no cars, no sustenance. So I don't have a choice. And now they have a choice. And so it's in a sense we're at a crossroads where now a lot of women have to figure out why they like us in the first place. And a lot of men have to figure out what we can bring to their lives. The good news, as someone who has found the answer to that, is that I can tell you that thankfully, nature is still more or less in balance, and that the majority of women deep down understand they need a man, and the majority of men understand they need a woman. Men will outright tell you that. We are honest enough to say, yeah, I like women and I want one to love me. Like that's a goal that I have. Women, not so much, because it goes against the current programming, right? To recognize that you want a man and need a man is to accept that you're not enough for yourself. And that for some reason is sexist. When to me, it's just logical. You are female, you're half, and I'm male and I'm half. And together we are 100%. The fact that your 50% is not enough and doesn't make you happy is not anti-feminist, it's just normal. Feminism should encourage women to go and seek out their happiness. And if this means getting with a man, then so be it. It means getting with a man. It's partially because of that, this pseudo neo-feminism that is extremely prevalent in the West, that we are having these difficulties. I also don't want to be the guy who points the finger at women. Men have their faults. It's the responsibility is on both hands. But figuring out how to get together again, I think is going to be the big challenge of our time.
Completely. So just one thing about that yeah, you can just feel it, right? That if you see a clip and someone is going to go up to some women and say something like, do we need men really? Like, everyone knows what they're supposed to answer. Like, no, absolutely not, right? So what we're starting to touch on now, I was thinking before, because, I wish that I was a little bit more caught up with all your content. I found you, I would say, early 2022, and I watched more of your videos then. The point is that I know kind of what things you talk about, and that this sort of discussion, I just don't know quite where to start with questions. So if I'm a little just fumbling with the way I try to transition here, please excuse me. But I know one video of yours that I watched that was somewhat recent was kind of your incel story. So I think we can start there and then start talking a bit about men and mental health and related topics. So please tell us a little bit, that kind of thing. And I'll share. I was never a complete incel, but I can relate to that. So I'll share some also.
Yeah. So let's begin by replacing the church at the center of the village, as we say in French, where incel means involuntary celibate. All right. This is not something that you choose to be. This is not something that people enjoy being. It's not a political affiliation. It's not a religion. It's close to a cult, as we'll see. But it's something that happens to the least fortunate males, meaning that some people are born to be incels. They're going to be short, they're going to be ugly, they're going to be handicapped. And society is going to treat them horribly because of this. So it already starts poorly for them. The resentment that builds up for this mistreatment then becomes their identity. And this is what Inceldom is. This is what becoming an incel is. This is what happened to me. Whereas I told you at the start, I was very cute. Then puberty ravaged me. I was mistreated by men and women alike, where men beat me up and women made me understand I was a creature. I would have loved being left alone. I didn't care about women, but I had women go out of their way to remind me, hey, you are lesser than the other men. We do not like you. And even though you do not want us, we really do not want you. That doesn't feel great, especially when you didn't really ask in the first place. Then I had a growth spurt. And that growth spurt made me go from like 5 feet to 6 feet in 3 years. So I was a completely different person. And some people would say, well, and I actually got a lot of comments of people who didn't understand the video saying, well, okay, that cured your Inceldom, right? Because suddenly you were popular. Actually, no, it made it worse. Because I was smart enough to realize, okay, I'm the exact same person with the exact same human heart within a slightly bigger, more attractive body. And now you treat me like I'm gold when you used to treat me like I'm shit. I remember I think it was first year of high school, there was this like tall blonde girl that hated me, disparaged me like out of the blue, made me feel like horrible. I didn't even talk to the girl. I didn't like her, didn't want to have anything to do with her. She picked on me constantly because I was a representation of an attractive man. And so she felt like it was her duty to remind me, hey, we don't like you. End of the year, I have my growth spurt. Suddenly I'm above her. I tower over her. And now she likes me. And now she's sweet. And I remember the first few times I was like, what is going on here? Like, is this a strategy? You're going to backstab me? No, she was into me now. And this disgusted me. Like, it really made me see women in a non-positive light where I felt like, well, so this is what I'm dealing with. You are this shallow. I really don't want to deal with you. And so going forward, I had always this like distance with women, or whenever a woman tried to like hit on me or like be seductive, to me it felt wrong, it felt weird, and I felt on my guard. So I always rejected these attempts because I couldn't believe they were real. To me, I was still unattractive, and I was getting very resentful towards this. And all of that culminated at a point where I realized that I needed to do something about it. And I took a step that many incels do not take, where I realized that it was my responsibility. Because even though, yes, I was mistreated by women and men alike, yes, I didn't have a good childhood, I do not have these excuses anymore. And if I want to cling onto that trauma forever, it's on me. So I decided to just let go and start living my life as if it never happened. It's easier said than done, but I started doing that. And of course, the fact that I was now attractive and tall really helped. But what really changed everything was the fact that I was no longer exuding this aura of negativity that is palpable around certain men, or you can tell they don't like themselves, they don't like society, and they hate women. No woman is going to be turned on by that. They're going to be afraid of that type of vibe for a good reason, because they know that you're not a good person. So letting go of that dark cloud. And it didn't mean that my life became amazing, but suddenly I was getting rejected on valid, solid grounds, where women would tell me, hey, you're not my type, or I have a boyfriend, or I'm not interested. And that was fine. And I put myself through that gauntlet of rejection where within a year I got rejected 30 times. Because whenever I saw a pretty girl, I would hit her up. I didn't care about the results. And the more I did that, the more I realized, hey, my self-worth is not tied to what they think of me. It's tied of what I think of me. Fuck everyone else, as long as I'm in my good skin, feeling good. And once I had reached that, I was nonchalant, which women tend to love. And I was able to approach people naturally and organically. Men say, oh, how is it possible in this modern age? By just going with the flow, seeing a chance, talking to people. Don't make every interaction this life or death intense battle that I see many men do when they cold approach women, or the woman can tell like you're hyped up on like some sort of cocaine, and she's like, whoa, I don't like that intensity and energy, like chill the fuck down. That's part of that. It's realizing that you have options. If you get rejected, it means nothing. Nothing has happened to your soul. Your self-worth is still the same. And those are the path that I took outside of Inceldom. And unfortunately, I realized that it was a crossroads Where when I was in my early 20s, I could have just went down the path of resentment and said, fuck society, fuck women. It's not my fault. I don't want to change. And today I would not be the same person. And I certainly would not be married. You cannot create a family with a woman when you feel like this towards them.
Of course, of course. No, it's interesting because I would say I was never an incel, literally, but I've said that I had what I would call an incel mentality. Like I might as well have been. Like I never felt, even that I, could get girls and hook up with a girl. I still felt, I don't know if the right word is like inferior, like intimidated, or I have some kind of problems with women. I'm insecure about women. And so my thing is kind of like, well, in like when I'm like 6 to 9, I just remember that then I felt like I was not one of the pretty kids because I don't know, the girls I liked or something, they would get together with some other guy. Then I switched schools to middle schools. And now this was like I was a player here, like yeah, I was together with like 5 different girls in my class or something. Then in my teens, I started having these on and off things that I know for me that from quite early, I tried to get like self-worth from, hooking up or getting just validated, whether she like, if she wants to be together with me, it's enough at that point when you're like 12, 13 years old, right? But I just know that from very early, there was like a big quest I had. There's some girl I'm interested in that I, want to hook up with or want to be together with because somehow this gives me some kind of value, And so for me, it was, I feel like I was never the guy that would just reign women over. But I never went completely without attention either. I definitely never had the experience that women were like really mean to me or something, but they would though, would see that they could use me, just like positive attention from me, right? And they know I want something more that they don't want to, and they could be nice and tell me, no, I'm not interested in this. But of course, we're all immature kids. Like I could have understood too. But the point is like, I feel like I can relate a lot to the incel mentality, even though I never was one. Like, especially, so for me, it happened after like high school and I've just had no idea what to do with my life. I had random jobs. Like the best thing I actually did in a past life was that I learned to make money from online poker, so I did that for a while. But so what happened when I just completely lost on and off, do not feel good, anxious, depressed? I've not been into politics at all up until this day. Then one day, I just read a random news article and I just see it go on about, white men, and in this like very derogatory, angry way. And I remember being shocked first because what I've always heard that seems to be reasonable, right? It's like, we don't like racism, we don't like sexism, that's no good, and then when you get into reading about that, you realize quickly there's some kind of neo-Marxist idea when you can just be sexist and racist to certain people and this and that. But I got very angry by all of this back then. And I think at first, at least for me, first you start to become angry at like the system, the media, the politicians that have influenced us in this way. But inevitably, it's going to seep over. And I started actually resenting women a lot more, like immigrants too, I guess, for all the immigration situation and that. But what happened to me was before this panic attack thing that happened, it's like, with many things. I was very, very lost in life at this point. I've been in a relationship with a girl then, the only like true relationship at that point. And it's kind of funny. I was this kind of secretly alt-right guy, like definitely alt-right. I identified with that label back in the day. I never saw myself as like, I don't know, a neo-Nazi or something, but it seemed to fit like the alt-right thing. But of course, you cannot talk about that. It's like the first rule of being alt-right. You do not talk about being alt-right. And I got together with this angry feminist girl. Of course, somehow these like opposites attract. But also, of course, that relationship didn't really last. I wanted out of the relationship in part because it was never right, but in part because I felt like I needed to sleep with more women was my thing. And I noticed this is quite a common thing with some guys that has this huge need from validation from girls somehow, that somehow I just felt like if I just sleep with more girls, then I'll be happy. But yeah, I had regrets after getting out of that relationship and hooking up with a few girls, noticing that this didn't really change anything for me. Now I felt like I made a huge mistake with this girl, and I tried to get her back, get into some kind of toxic situationship. But I had to move away from that, because now I get completely just like she can just have me whenever she wants to, and I don't get the commitment I want. But before this panic attack thing started, I started realizing what you realized, that I cannot, what I started thinking is really, who am I to have all these criticism and be so angry about women and feel so entitled to, attention and validation or sex or whatever from women? Who am I really? And looking back, I think that was one of the things that just made my ego freak out into panic attacks. Just realizing that how big of a hypocrite I was. That who was I to have all these opinions about women or whoever. And then when I went through this transformational journey, facing the panic attacks and starting training and that, I noticed that my need to, because that was always an ongoing thing for me since the teens, there's always trying to hook up with some girl, whether I'm successful or not. Because that's what I say. I was never the guy that went completely without, but sometimes, definitely, for a long time, Suddenly I just noticed that I don't really have this need anymore. I have the urge, of course, I have a sex drive, but I don't really feel this need anymore. And I started understanding and thinking more about women's perspective. And one thing, this I can ask you actually, it's interesting. One thing that really made me understand women in a different way was when I started getting gay guys being really thirsty on me when I'm posting my physique. And in my view, from my point of view, by the way, is that I was always showcasing my physique as look, see the difference. And I always told the story that this is not just on the outside, that this represents a bigger transformation I've gone through. So I never think of it so much. I see me show off my sexy physique here. But then when I get some guys that are completely drooling over me in the way they talk to me, I just realized that, in my case, I'm just going to feel a bit disgusted by that, because I'm a big, strong guy, and this is just some guy. But I just notice how it's not so nice when you are a person, complete human being, that, you try to present yourself and it's what you stand for. And you can clearly tell, this person is just looking at me as a piece of meat right now. And that really made me understand how I could feel sometimes, that women, they should be happy. They get so much more, attention for their looks and stuff. They should be happy about it. I realized that getting that kind of attention from someone that you really don't want to, it doesn't feel all that nice.
Yeah, well, I mean, you touched on so many things. I'm going to have to go back a bit. But to start with, it is true that an insane amount of validation is derived from your ability to get women as a man. And that is a perversion of masculinity, because now it makes you regress from a social creature to a biological creature, where it's how many mates can you get? And that means you're a good male, not even a good man. But this is hyper prevalent. And I always want people to keep that in mind when they point at incels, because incels are a byproduct of society. They don't want to be like this. They have been put at the bottom of the pyramid because of their inability to get mates. So when I see women who get upset, you don't owe incels any sex or affection, but understand that you are the object that they desire and cannot have. And this is all parts of that system that women also benefit from, because oftentimes when the term patriarchy is thrown around in the collective imagination, it's by males for males. That makes no sense. A matriarchy is not by women for women. It's for everyone that lives within the matriarchy and that benefit from it. Women benefit from the patriarchy. They also suffer from it to a great extent, just like with men. Then we can discuss how much do we benefit, how much do we suffer. But incels are a perfect example of males who suffer from a patriarchal system, because under a patriarchal system, you are either a solution or you're a problem. So you're either strong and you make your own way and you get your own woman and you are good, you are rewarded by the patriarchy, or you cannot do that and now you're a problem because you're a representation of the system's failure and you are going to be made to feel like you are the problem and not the system, which is a different discussion. Do we need to change the system? Maybe not. But realizing where this feeling of inferiority from the male that cannot get women comes from is key. And it connects politically to this anti-immigrant and some would call racist or like alt-right mindset. There is a reason why there is a pipeline between the two. It has nothing to do with the fact that the two philosophically make sense. It's that they're connected in their resentment of being to say, look at me, look at my problems. Can I see something outside of me that would cause that? It's made even worse if you are white, for example, and you're an incel, and on top of that, you read that you are the source of all of the problems in the world. And you feel like, okay, so not only am I oppressed by the system, but now you're telling me that I own the system and that I oppress you. Who have I oppressed? Incels cannot oppress anyone. The nature philosophically of oppression is one of hierarchies. So if you're at the bottom of the barrel, you oppress no one. The guy who's in his bedroom in Idaho, who has never touched a woman in his life, who posts mean comments on Instagram, is not oppressing women. You can make the case that he's oppressed by a system that doesn't give him the object of his desire. He's not entitled to it at the end of the day. But the guy is not part of that pyramid at all. And the way out of that mindset, and the reason why many men grow out of the alt-right mindset, is realizing that part of it is entitlement, but also understanding where the source of the attack comes from. You use the word neo-Marxist, and I think it's a good word to use because the neo is what matters here. We're not talking about the economic theory of Marxism. We're talking about the substract of it that is now prevalent in the West, where we completely gave up on class warfare, which is the key, and we focus instead on cultural and sexual differences, which is a substract that Marx didn't even really care about that much, where he clearly said, hey, this is a byproduct. If you focus on this, you are part of the enemy. We're going deep into the meta of Marxism right now, but Occupy Wall Street in the US was exactly that. Occupy Wall Street told people, hey, your enemy is the 1%. I don't care if you're gay, trans, or black. The rich people who own the media are the enemy. These very same rich people did not like the fact that the people got together, and so they managed to subvert the message to let's instead divide people by race, sexuality, etc., etc. And this gave birth to neo-Marxism. Some people call it also cultural Marxism, a term that is oftentimes attacked by leftists, but that is actually quite prevalent nowadays because this is what we see the most. And this is what feeds this resentment in people on both sides. Because the ultra-feminist and the alt-right guy, they have the same heart. It's full of resentment. They are very similar individuals in reality. And there's a reason why usually you end up finding these feminists in relationships with these covert alt-right guys. They have a lot in common. But if you want a good relationship with a male and a female, you have to have two balanced individuals who have understood that life is not that, and that life starts after resentment. And you've started to touch on that too with perspective. As a male, I always encourage my audience to try and see the problem from the female perspective, to understand why they might say things that make us upset. When you hear, we don't need men, and men are dangerous, and we hate men, this is not true. You're not understanding what they're trying to say. They're trying to say, we live in a system where we depend on you for protection, and you are our number one predator, and we wish we could trust you, but we can't, because we keep getting hurt. As a man, when you hear that, instead of being, oh, feminist and women are idiots, think instead, okay, how can I be the model of the male specimen that would allow such a society to exist? This means being a good listener, being kind to women, and protecting women and putting them above you. That to me is masculinity in its purest sense. You notice that in my definition, I did not talk about sex or your ability to get a woman, because once you have that, a woman is going to want to attach herself to you, because now you're a good man. And suddenly your worth is no longer attached to whatever that woman can give to you in terms of affection, because now you've earned something much greater, and that is the love of a woman. Sexual attention is easy to come by in today's society. You can get as much as you want if you're slightly good looking, but love and dedication and commitment from a good woman, that is invaluable. And once you have that, you've made it.
Yeah. You know, I guess because I've seen that you do these like relationship advice sort of streams. And I guess, you know, it's almost like, you know, because I feel that what applies to most don't necessarily apply to myself, because I agree with everything you said, by the way. I like what you said, like what makes out a good man there, being the good listener, not including sex in it or your ability to get women. But I guess like what I think about sometimes is like, what's the way out of this? Because I feel just like you said, there's this divide and conquer thing where, among others, men and women have been turned against each other. And I see it so unfortunate because it's so nice, whether it's romantic or not, when you meet the girl that actually relaxes into her feminine and can appreciate you as a man, it makes it so easy to be even more manly and take charge and lead too. But that's what I mean here. Like, I'm not trying to play the victim or like complain about it, but I observe here though that that is, I don't get a negative reaction to it, but I feel like some girls, that it's like they don't even understand that kind of thing, you know. But I guess what is the question I want to ask you? But it just to make you go on, like what is the way out for us both, really? Like, because we're talking, of course, a lot to men, but we have a couple percent females. So what should we all do here, really?
Well, it's going to sound quite paternalistic, but it's fine because there's nothing wrong with having one member of the relationship take the lead at the start. So oftentimes, if you're a man and you're solid, like you know who you are, and you have a solid grasp on your masculinity, you will end up meeting women who do not have that, or their femininity, and it's not really their fault, has been demonized. Women in the West are told that whatever is feminine is stupid. Having babies, stupid. Have a job, babies are bad. Marriage and taking care of a man, horrible. You're a slave now. Go work 55 hours a week instead. That's much better. Right? All of
Mm-hmm.
that connects directly to what we spoke about and capitalism taking over. But in this scenario, we always have to keep in mind that a lot of these women, they just need to be shown that a better way exists, that they do not have to be that like caricature and that they could just be themselves. Because in a theory of identity, we must recognize that there are many women nowadays who unfortunately are being told to be a certain way. And I have many examples of that throughout my life where I've dated women who had certain behaviors where I could tell it caused them harm and anguish. And I would tell them, hey, why do you behave like this? And you would be surprised the amount of time where I heard, oh, it's because I was told that this makes me a good feminist. And
Mm-hmm.
this is, to me, the nail in the coffin of neo-feminism. Feminism was supposed to liberate women and allow them to do what they want with their lives. If it becomes this new Bible that tells women do this and not that, then it's just as bad as the male oppression that was before. So,
Mm-hmm.
as a man, opening the eyes of women and being like, hey, you understand this is nonsensical, it's not even in line with your values, this is illogical, you are just following the herd, why are you doing this? Some women are a lost cause and they will just resist you. Some are intelligent and in touch enough with who they are to realize, hey, maybe this guy is going to allow me to relax a bit. And once a woman can relax and rely on you, I always use the analogy of men being the mountain and men and women being the sea. Women are ever changing, much more beautiful. They are much more prone to these like violent waves, ups and downs of emotions. Men are much more stoic in nature. The two complete each other. Once a woman realizes that you're solid and she can be herself and she doesn't have to be the rock anymore, the relationship is going to be smooth sailing from there on. The issue is that many men cannot provide that. Many modern men are no longer the rock, they're no longer the mountain. And so these very same women will try to test the guy's solidity, find that there is nothing there and that the guy is a frail bitch, and they will think, in a sense, as a way, as an auto-suggestion, hey, I can't rely on these guys. And so this is what you see in modern society where it's in a sense okay to blame women for like being too masculine, but let's understand where this comes from. It's a vacuum that they're filling. Men are not masculine enough, so they have to take up that role, and no one is happy.
Oh yeah, to be clear, I don't blame women for this. That's that's a big thing for me these days. Like to take responsibility myself. Where like of course, we can have criticisms or observe things going on, but I always try to ask myself, like, what's my part of this, and what can I do? And it's kind of like that's an unrelated thing, but as an example, I try to tell my parents sometimes when we talk about when I was little, because they want to argue about things with me. I'm like, look, I don't want to tell you that you did this wrong. I just want you to understand, like why maybe I think a certain way now and that. So yeah, but I guess when I want to ask because I think it's not the easiest thing. Like how should people like really meet and date these days? Like personally, I'm sick of these dating apps, and I can say my situation is during this uncommon sense time. I've been in one relationship. on and off a bit, a very complicated situation that I have not got into depth on my YouTube channel. But basically, that's the girl I've been involved with. And the way I feel, for me personally, actually, I was thinking about this meme before this podcast, that so in this world, in this meme, there are two half circles. So clearly everyone is part of a circle that makes like a circle together. The two parts, they sit in a couch and they look in the middle, it looks like just typical puzzle pieces. And then enters another half circle that's just like this massive, insane pattern in the middle. And these two in the couch are like, you haven't found your soulmate yet? And that's a little bit what I feel like sometimes, that it's like, I found one. I love her. I've come so far that I'm like, you know what? If it doesn't work out, I'm fine. But sometimes I'm like, where would I find someone though? Not the one night this. I mean, when you're not hung up on the one girl, I'm just like, I barely know how I should go about it. I've tried every once in a while to get on one of these apps, but I can't do it anymore.
Well, the apps are a consequence of what we would call a nuclearized society. Well, now the means of meeting people organically have been destroyed, and they've been destroyed for profit. Because now these websites can charge you for a fee to give you access to a dating pool. These bars can charge you an insane entrance fee so that you can get access to women, etc., etc. So all of that participates, and this is the reason why we're lonelier than ever. It's because we're poorer than ever, and now you have to pay to not be so lonely. In a sense, silver lining being that both men and women feel that. So both men and women feel that loneliness, and they feel that need to go and meet. And they all ask the same questions. The number one question I get the most on these dating streams is, how do I meet women? I think it's not a coincidence. The answer to that is wherever they are, as strange as it might sound. So where do women go in third places to relax? Well, I can tell you that they go to book clubs, they go to the library, they might go to hobby clubs, they might go to a coffee shop. If you go to any random coffee shop in every country on earth, there is a girl sitting at a table. She's with a book, she's with a laptop, she might be walking, she might be doing nothing. And then the next step is, how do I introduce myself and not look like a creep or be a hindrance? There are situations where I think that you should leave women alone. So a woman is like busting her ass in the gym, leave her alone. A woman is clearly like hyper-focused on her laptop, leave her alone. But outside of that, I'm personally of the mindset that if you are in public, you are available to talk to. I do not care who you are. You should be able to be approached, and you can say no. You can not even say a word and do this. That's very rude, but you can. But you need to be open to the idea that someone will try to talk to you. And as a man, that someone is going to be you, because women are not going to be the first step. So whenever you see an opportunity, that is your chance. It doesn't matter if you have a connection with the girl, because previous connections don't really exist. You make that connection. Your future wife is that woman you saw on a bench that you went by and thought, oh, she was cute, but I'm afraid of talking to her. In a different life, you had kids with that person. So it's up to you to go up and talk to that person. This is what I went through when I desensitized myself to rejection, where I promised myself, whenever I come across a cute girl, I will shoot my shot. And the success rate was less than 5%. But guess what? It's always higher than never shooting your shot.
No, completely. And I guess I know all of that. I just wanted to get your take on it. But I do think, it's not the easiest to give like very like concrete, practical advice for someone. But I guess that's kind of good, like a certain mindset, like in public, be open for it, look for it. And I guess it is good to have done that kind of thing, to, like you said, desynthesize yourself from rejection. I think I'm not so afraid of rejection, but I know I'm like this as a person in general. I'm definitely afraid on like just invading on a person, even if I know it's not a big deal to make someone a little uncomfortable or something, but I can definitely get into my head about that. But you don't think you should approach a girl in the gym? Is that right?
The issue of the gym is that the gym is a meat market, meaning that there is an overwhelming majority of men for a minority of women. And as a content creator and a bodybuilder, my goal is to get as many people as possible to train, and that includes women. The issue is that if they don't feel comfortable in the space where they can train, they're not going to come, or they're going to end up in these female-only gyms that then get men super riled up for some reason. No woman wants to pay more money to be with only women. They do that because they don't have a choice. And the reality is that the majority of women who go to the gym, especially if they're cute and young, get approached on average, I would say 5 to 10 times a month. And that's way too much, especially since the guys that approach them tend to not be super subtle about it or way too old, because meat market effect. There is a scarcity of women, so men go insane. I see the way guys look at women in my gym, and I want to go in front of them and be like, hey,
Yeah.
this is not Pornhub. Don't do that. Like guys who will stare, like set up on the machine and stare. It's okay to steal a glance, but don't like this is horribly creepy behavior. And the way I like to, and you went through that with the gay dudes thirsting on you, the way I like to make people realize is this. Imagine you're like 6 feet and buff. There's a 7 feet guy who's like 400 pounds who comes into the gym as you're doing squats, and he puts a seat behind you and he's like looking at your ass. Would you feel
Yeah.
comfortable? I don't think so. So don't do that to women. Like let them do their thing in the gym. And then you can approach when it's convenient or when it makes sense, when you catch her eye, or maybe she has shoes that you like, or she's doing a sport that you enjoy. Then you can talk and you have common ground, and maybe she'll be very happy. I've seen a lot of relationships start in the gym, but it's always on the woman's accord in that
Mm.
context.
How do you mean when you say on the woman's accord?
There are certain signs and body languages that tell you if a woman is comfortable. It's always okay to approach someone, but it's not okay to continue talking when the person doesn't want you to. If a
Mm.
woman starts to move her body away, puts her headphones back, starts to
Mm.
gesture towards the weight she's using, this means, thank you very much for the words, I'm done talking to you.
Mm.
Guys just keep on going. And that
Mm.
is not okay because this is when you put that woman in a situation where she's either going to have to tell you, hey, fuck off, which women do not do because they're non-confrontational. So now you make that poor woman sit through your monologue. And this woman is going to be afraid of you going
Yeah.
forward because the next time she sees you, she'll be like, fuck, is he going to do that again?
Yeah, you make me think of so last weekend there was this like fitness festival or whatever, and I wasn't gonna go because it's pretty much just a freak show mostly. But some friends of mine, there were some like competitions for other things there, so I went there to meet them. And when I was heading home on the train, like just in the other, 4 seats there, I just heard. I guess I'm just sitting, and I just heard like, "Hey," like someone like introducing themselves. So I just like steal a glance, like you said, and I see this guy just trying to shake the hand of a girl, and she didn't even take his hand. She was like, "Hi," and you can just tell that like, this is uncomfortable right from the start. But he would just not stop talking to her, just in a way you say. He started bragging about doing push-ups every day and stuff. I was like, "Oh, bro," but. Luckily for her that she was going off on the next station, or I mean, I guess maybe she just got so uncomfortable she left. I'm not sure.
It's possible.
But do you know actually just one interesting thing I've noticed from being just like a bigger guy that I would not have thought of, that I've now analyzed a little bit and realized that, because something I try to do, I live sort of a lonely life. Like, I'm single now. I work in part from home. I mean, I meet some friends here and there, but pretty much I'm solo a big amount of the time. So something I've tried to do to just be a bit more social in my life is that I've gone out of my way to just speak more to people, like in the gym or in the grocery store or wherever. So sometimes I will strike up a conversation with a girl when I'm not even trying to like hit on her or anything. But I just feel this like sort of guard up. And I realized something, that when you're a bigger guy, maybe you are actually quite intimidating to some girls, because to a girl, you can actually be a physical threat. While, I don't know, I guess a girl could potentially make me a little uncomfortable, but I won't have a subconscious fear that she'll like beat me or rape me or something. So that's something I realized, that, you kind of have to watch out with, I don't know, just being a big guy, coming close to a girl like that.
And we people get really mad at like the thought of a male privilege, but that is a male privilege. Physical dominance, the fact that we have
Mm.
a monopoly on physical development, and the average man is tremendously stronger than the average woman, is something that we don't have to live with. I never end up in an elevator thinking that guy could like bend me over. That's not possible. Like, I'm going to put up a fight and he's going to lose. But the average woman, like, it's a story that I told on my channel where one night I came home at 3 a.m. from a party. And when I entered the hallway where the elevator was, there was already a girl. And she was one of my neighbor and she was my age, a gorgeous girl. And when she heard the noise of the door close, she turned around. And the look of horror on her face was so striking that I turned around myself because I thought there was someone behind me, potentially someone sneaking in with a weapon, but there was no one. And so I turned with a quizzical look on my face, like, what is your problem? And then I realized that I was her problem because from her perspective, it was 3 a.m. in an hall with no cameras. It was just the two of us. There was a place where the garbage was just there where I could just drag her by the foot. No one would hear her. The elevator was not even closed. And worse than that, she was most likely thinking, if I enter the elevator with that guy, I'm now stuck with a guy that can overpower me. And like
Yeah.
these thoughts flashed through my mind because of perspective, because of what the look that I saw on her face. And at that moment, I realized that difference. And I told her, would you prefer me wait outside? And she like said yes with her head. And so I just waited outside, let her take the elevator by herself. That's a small gesture of kindness that as a man you can extend to a woman that would make her feel better. But then we also have to keep in mind one thing, and it's something that I call the tiger paradox. Women are afraid of tigers, but women only date tigers. So the
Hmm.
thing that makes you intimidating is also what makes you, in a sense, attractive to them. Because that strength is a threat up until it's theirs, up until you belong to them. And now it's their strength. So now it becomes something that is very useful to them. And it's something that I found out, and you will find out too, and many men find out when they become big. You're intimidating until you pass a test in the woman's head when she's like, oh, he's fine, and you're
Mm.
vetted. And now she's much more open, and now you're much more attractive, and you're going to get much more attention than a skinny guy that might not have had to go through that filter, but he's never going to go much further past that filter because he's never going to have that factor that women like.
Yeah, there are many things I think of there. One thing is just this: if you've had this sort of incel mindset, you tend to just see all the female privilege and like whatever they have to like. It's pretty much made up everything about male privilege and blah blah blah. But when you come out of that, you start seeing these things, how we have some of these privileges. Like another thing is I have a handful of clients on an actual like commercial gym chain, pretty much because it's close, and some people I know personally I can train there because I enjoy it. But so the girls, they are all girls working in the reception desk, and every time I stand there and someone comes to ask or buy something, they always face me. And I always think to myself like, this is a little, because the funny thing is too also that I cannot help them with whatever, like I don't have access to the system or anything. I can't even sell them a protein bar or something. And it's always this awkward moment when I'm like trying to steer them towards the girl instead. But yeah, it's interesting because I think that's what, the whole thing with girls like bad boys or whatever. It's not really that they like bad boys, but it's that some of those traits that a bad boy has are going to be very attractive. Like he might be aggressive. He might be even aggressive to her, but at least he is like assertive and strong, and he can protect her in that way. And if there's nowhere to be found anywhere else, maybe she'll end up with a bad boy. And what I've found is that as I get older too, and I deal with girls that are more like emotionally intelligent, they do. It is that even mix. They want you to be kind, but not nice. Like strong, yeah, patient, understanding in that. But you can assert yourself when you have to, even against her. Just no, don't be violent. But that you won't let her push you around. Basically, it's that sweet spot.
Yeah, it's what I call resistance. Women like resistance. Resistance is not aggressivity, it's not positive or negative, it's neutral. Resistance means I have certain boundaries and limitations that you cannot cross. Even though you are my girl or my wife, you cannot cross them. And that is incredibly attractive because it
Mm.
shows that you have the strength to uphold them. And a lot of men don't seem to understand that because they complain about the test, the shit test.
Yeah.
Why is my girl bothering me on this or nagging me on this? That is completely like a useless thing and doesn't really matter. It's because the thing doesn't matter. The mechanism through the thing matters. She's testing you to see if you're still there. It's like a car. We're going back to the analogy of the car. How do you test if a car works? You start it. How do you test if a man is still strong? You test him. You test his boundaries. What the woman expects from it is pushback. And you saying and asserting yourself and saying no. And that way she knows, okay, when I do that, he pushes back. When there will be eventually chaos or danger in our life, he will also push back. There is nothing worse than a man who is a doormat 24/7, because that woman is going to understand intuitively that he's not going to do much for me in life. He's not going to be very useful. We go back to this idea of, why do women want men? Why do they need men? They still need us for that assertiveness and that strength, even though we live in like a machine heavy world where you don't really need a man to cut trees for you anymore. But it doesn't matter. Psychologically, this is still needed. And I think that as long as there will be humans, it will be needed.
Oh yes, and one thing that I think is good to say, because about these like shit tests and that. Well, first of all, I think most girls do them unconsciously. You know, they don't think so much that I'm going to try this now. To me, that's more toxic girl maybe. You know, but many times at least they're gonna unconsciously try to push you somehow, see how you deal with it. And I think sometimes when I felt like I completely failed that test, I feel like I've screwed up and there's no turning back. What I found is that the good girls, they kind of will give you more chances, you know, and actually when you finally pass the test, it's kind of as if you never didn't pass it. And
Yes.
I just think that's kind of, I don't know, what's the word, soothing to know that you don't have to be perfect.
Yes, women will give you many chances, especially if they see potential in you. They'll just try and try and try. And it oftentimes takes years for a woman to lose any respect in a man because he failed too many tests. So it really is, and this is when we get into the idea of the patriarchy and men and women contributing. It is a way that women use to make men more masculine, because you want your guy to be more masculine. And it's the same with boys. There was a study that came out in 2018, I think, 2018, 2017, that studied highly patriarchal countries. And you would think that these highly patriarchal countries are created because men are the ones who raise the boys and tells them, you have to be a man, you have to do this. Well, the exact opposite was found. The more patriarchal a country was, the more the boys were raised by the mother. And you could say,
Hmm.
well, that is because that's what they have to do. They're forced onto that role. Not necessarily. What was found is that instead, a woman who lives in a system where strength, masculine strength is important, will naturally want their kid to have that, to have a good life. And so that is going to be the trait that is reinforced. And it's really not that surprising to see that in Western countries that are less and less patriarchal, you have more and more men who are not as masculine. And the byproduct is that they're not as attractive to women. They cannot keep a relationship. If they have one, they're going to have kids that are going to be even less masculine. And this is this degeneration that we are seeing that makes both sides unhappy.
Yes. So I'm going to ask quite an open question just to talk about something related. Like just I guess about, this is what someone wrote also in a comment, kind of like, what is the biggest issue men and the world face right now? And what do you think we should do about that? I know it's a big question.
It is a big question, but it's one that is easy to answer because I immediately had something coming to mind. To me, the biggest issue with men nowadays is distractions. It's that we spend so much of our time trying to forget that we're alive in the first place. And a lot of people don't like to hear that, but something like watching sports is huge. That's so many hours you're sinking into something that does nothing for your development. And worse than that, you are outsourcing your physical fitness because you're watching other men be fit instead of being fit. The average Frenchman who is a soccer fan might spend 4 to 5 hours a week watching soccer. If you put these 5 hours in bodybuilding, you would be a different man. But you're not. You watch soccer instead. Don't even get me started on the US. Football, college football, basketball, they spend their time and holidays watching these things. Is it any surprise that it's the most obese country in the world? I think that this participates. It's a huge issue, and it's something that I pointed out in a video about self-improvement. Well, now self-improvement has become about consuming media instead of going out there and doing things. And that's a perversion, that's consumerism 101, but that's what make men what they are nowadays. You are born a male, but not every male is a man. A man is built through action. If you never act onto it, you will never be a man. I keep meeting dudes in their 30s, 40s, sometimes 50s, where it's like, you're not a woman, but you're also not a man. So
Mhm.
congratulations, you just invented a third gender. it fascinates me that they're able to live that old without realizing what the issue is. But times and times again, what I found with these types is that they're soft, they have horrible relationships with women, they have kids that hate them, they have dead-end jobs, and they're just not happy. And because they're not happy, they overconsume even more, they end up overweight with alcohol issues, drug issues. It's just a spiral, and it all starts from lack of physical activity.
Mm. Yeah, that's a great answer, actually. In many ways I can take that, but I'll ask you, have you been in that place when you just distracted yourself?
Yes, totally. Totally. When I was a young kid, that's what I used to do. My early teens were consumed by video games, or that's all I would do. I would wake up in holidays when there wasn't school, I would wake up at 9 a.m. and I would play video games until 7 p.m. Rinse and repeat every day. What did it do for me? Nothing. It just destroyed my hormonal profile, made me soft and weak, did not improve my life because I was constantly trying to escape my life and my problems in this virtual reality where suddenly I was this great warrior. Turn off the computer, you're a fat kid on a computer chair. You're just as bad as you used to be and you're getting worse. I was saved from that cycle because I quit video games eventually and I started to really get into fitness because I realized, hey, I'm done watching and now I want to act. I want to be the guy. I want to be the hero. And this is why the masculine fantasy and the power fantasy is so important, but it's also so toxic because it can become a thing that you just consume instead of you becoming your fantasy.
Mm. Yeah, I laugh because I know I have an old video that's called something like "The Modern Man: Soft and Weak, Soft and Weak," and I've definitely been, that. Yeah, it was a great answer. I haven't thought about it like that, but it's so true because I think about the way I used to be and the guys I surrounded myself with. I can think of a certain clique of guys that, I have nothing against any of them, but I don't really hang out with any of them anymore. But what we would do when we got together was literally like, order junk food. We have beer, probably weed. We're gonna, watch something on the TV or play video games and just do more and more of these things. Maybe we'll go out and try to find some girls in a bar or something. But it's so much just numbing yourself with pleasure. And then I came to that place when, just like you, I'm like, I've had enough of this. I want to do things now. I just don't want to watch or consume, whether that's looking at something or just eating or drinking something. And then I just noticed I had less and less in common with these guys. And I guess it's a good little segue to kind of male loneliness. Because I'll say about myself that I said I live a sort of a lonely lifestyle, but I'm someone that completely, this last 6 years, I've changed me and my life to the better, like in every way. But what happens a lot is that, I've cut off so much people and slowly I've added new people into my life, but not all of them are close. And sometimes if I'm not in my at my best place, I can end up feeling a little bit like lonely, and where's kind of, yeah, there are people I know, I have friends, but where's my tribe, kind of? And I think a lot of guys can relate to that kind of thing, probably worse than I would experience it at times. What do you think about that?
One, I think it's one of the reasons why channels like ours are so popular, is because we offer that tribe. When our
Mm,
men can go and talk to people who are like-minded. Oftentimes when I stream, people on the chat are talking amongst themselves. They're not even interacting with the stream. They're
mm,
having their whole tribe meeting in the chat. And that's great. I love that. I promote that. Now, in terms of epidemic, it must be said that the male loneliness epidemic is oftentimes produced and created by men because
mm,
it's we have all these self-isolating tendencies and traits of cutting people off or not wanting to look weak in the eyes of others, and so I'm not going to share something that I always try to impress on my male viewers is that whenever you're feeling bad is when you need to seek out your friends because this is what friends are for. They're there to support you. If they're only there when it's fair weather, they're not friends. And all good friends will gladly support you because they know you'll do that for them. Actually, this is the perfect way to know if you have a friend. I've had many times in my life where I needed someone that I was there for, and the second I reached out, that person was gone. That's not a
mm,
friend. You can push that person away. But on the other side, I have guys who live in France right now. If I give them one phone call and say, I need you, they'll be there in 48 hours. They'll take a plane. They won't even ask why. They just know I need to be there, and I'll do that for them as well. This is what is needed, and we don't have enough of that because that type of friendship is rare.
Yeah.
Your circle of friends constricts as you age. You have a gazillion friends in middle school. And then in high school, it gets smaller and college smaller. And then you wake up in your 30s one day, you have three guys. Honestly, three guys is enough. Right? You give me three guys, I can take over a country. If you
Mm.
don't have that, you have to find these three guys. And the good thing is that I keep meeting new dudes in their 30s, 40s, 50s who are desperate for this, who are
Mm.
desperate for that tribe. And so they will gladly link up with you. But you have to look for them. They're not going to pop into your living room. They're in the gym. All right. They're going to complement your biceps. You'll hit a session together. Boom. That's a bro. And maybe that guy is going to then escalate and transcend into a friend. But just like with women, you make your own connections. So if you feel lonely, you cannot hope that the world is going to solve that for you. You have to
Yeah.
go out there.
Oh yes, oh yes. That's one of the things I've definitely learned, that you can look at your circumstances around you, just as you're solving a problem, kind of, okay, it's a little bit tricky because this and this, but in the end, if things don't change, you have to change. Cannot wait for the world to change. I think that's what I kind of did until the age of 25. When, for me, it was that awakening. When if I could overcome that panic attack shit, then everything else that felt like impossible, and I can definitely do. But yeah, I think that's good. That's what I've done. Like because there was a time definitely early with this lifestyle. I think you started training by yourself too, right? Because some guys I know now, for instance, that are like, I don't know, 6, 7 years older than me, that also started training way earlier. They also have a little bit of a community from that. And I think when I started, like, no one around me is training. It's completely just me doing it. And I'm not saying that all my friends have to like train, but my new interest, I had like no one obvious to connect with. But I did what you said, that I would just start striking up conversations in the gym or in the sauna, in the gym or whatever. And some of these guys have become my friends. And I also say, because social media, I have very strong feelings in like both direction. On one level, I love many things about it. I also like being a YouTuber, and that I sometimes I feel it sucks a little bit, that I feel like entangled in it. I'd like to take a break. And I think many of us know, like, some toxic sides of it. But one good thing is that if you feel like you don't see your people anywhere close to you, you might find them on social media. Like two friends of mine now, the one of them I've had on the podcast, Henrik, also very much a philosophiseeker kind of guy. Him and another guy, I just saw them on Instagram. It's like, man, these guys seem like the guys I'd like to know. I just shoot them a few messages, and suddenly I booked this like weekend when I go meet them, and we had a great time. So I think that's an issue with a lot of people. They sit and analyze their situation and what's lacking, and then they don't really do any steps to change it.
Yeah, and it could also be because of fear of rejection, because you don't want to look ridicule when you're the one who extends the hand and you get shut down. It feels bad. But the good news is that the average person is not mean like that, and the average person is not going to reject you in that fashion. So it really is important to put yourself out there as a guy.
Oh yes, I'm thinking also. I'd like to like actually in real life, because it's great what you said also. Yeah, that we create some kind of community around like a YouTube channel or something. I also know that I have some guys that I know have become friends because they started talking on a comment or whatever. Turns out they live close or something. But I'm right now. I'm also thinking like, how can I actually do some kind of I hate it. Sounds silly somehow, but some kind of men's group, some kind of meetups in actual real life too, because that's one thing. Social media and being able to connect with people online is great, but it's like an addition to actual socializing, right? It can completely replace it like that.
Well, the risk of the meetup, of course, is the parasocial aspect of it, of people
Mm,
meeting you as if they were meeting their idols. And this is
yeah.
what is making me a bit resistant towards this very idea.
Mm,
Also because I feel like the energy of a training session where you end up being the center of attention is not really the point.
yeah.
I train with people, but these people don't know who I am. They don't know that I have a presence online. I'm just a bro that they train with. And these sessions tend to be great because the energy of emulation is tremendous because they're centered towards them. They're looking inward. They're not looking at me.
Mm.
This is my resistance towards this idea.
Yeah, you know, if we're talking about the training meetup like that, I think I wouldn't even train if I did a thing like that. I would like coach the session or something. But since you mentioned that word, parasocial, that's kind of interesting. Because that I remember was like just one of the themes I picked up on with the first few videos I saw with you. So I guess I'll just ask you, what is your experience just, you know, having a following like this, being someone that's sort of a hero or, you know, authority or whatever, hero figure for certain people?
Well, I can tell you that it does not matter how much effort you put into not developing a parasocial relationship, it's out of your hands. The
Mm.
parasocial is always on the shoulders of the person who watches you. Then there are certain things you can do to avoid developing too much of it. So, for example, giving a name to your followers. Like if I call my subscribers the 90 hypees, what's up, 90 hypees? That's huge because you now give a name to an identity that they can subscribe to. I don't do that. Doing merch with your face on it, which is pretty much what every YouTuber does once they become big enough because it's a massive cash grab. Horrible for parasocial. Now you have a shirt with your name on it or your like catchphrase that people wear. It's essentially like a part of a cult. Like they're wearing a garment that says, I belong to that group. I don't like that. But I've also realized that paradoxically, being too anti-parasocial breeds the parasocial because then people are like, oh, look at him. He's telling me like not to do that and everything. And now you become a sort of guru. So now what I do is I've talked enough about the parasocial. It's out of my hands. If you want to worship me, a random French guy on the internet that's on you, it's not a good look. I will look down on you for it because anyone who would worship me is not a smart person. And I will focus on the people who understand that I'm a conduit, who are willing to use me. I understand it's a bit weird to say that, but when you make content, I always would prefer if people consume my content because they benefit. I would hate to be the guy that people watch just because it's him, just
Mm.
because he uploaded. We want him to feel good. Fuck that. What can I improve in your life with that content? This is what I want. I want my viewers to be selfish. Use me and use content creators because they use you in return. So you might as well get as much as you can and don't have an allegiance for people. Don't think that just because you like the guy, he's right. I always like when people push back and they say, oh, I don't agree with you. And oftentimes they always open by saying, I'm sorry. Why? I'm sorry, but I don't agree. Why are you sorry for disagreeing? We live in such a weird, hyper-civilized society, or now even the action of not agreeing with someone is an aggression. Disagreeing is the salt of fitness and of social media. Without it, we're nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. No, I love I love disagreement, I was gonna say, but what I mean is kind of I know I'm kind of agreeable as a person that I would like us to agree. I will try to see that I can understand your perspective, even if I don't completely. But I don't want to agree just to agree, and I don't want you to agree just to agree either. If and I think it really is an issue with a lot of people that, like you said, that you can't even disagree because that's how we learn. You know, if you and I talk about something, we don't have the exact same view. We disagree a little bit. We present each our view. You know, maybe we both influenced each other a little bit. Maybe we don't completely change, but you know, this is how you improve. You know, I don't remember that some good quote. Well, you know, it's kind of difficult sometimes, I guess, to have to look at yourself with certain things. Maybe you're a bit more attached to, and that. But in the end, the person that cannot disagree, cannot handle disagreement, they get kind of robbed at the growth that can come from that. But I guess me with the following, I guess what I want to get to is that for me it's kind of new still to have now it's slowed down a bit, but especially when the channel blew up it was kind of like, oh, I'm not used to this, getting so much input. And I realized, I think when I was younger, thinking of like something like having a YouTube channel that's is like, oh, you know, fame, it's kind of cool and that. I realize, well, I've dropped that since a long time, but I realize now that, man, that really it's intense just having so many eyes at you. You know, it doesn't even have to be like critical eyes. You know, just feel like when I post something, like a lot of people are gonna have opinions and say things, whether positive or not. You know.
Well, that's why fame is such a huge test of character and the better test of character because it reveals who a person is. You have a lot of people who can stay humble and good when they're small, But when they blow up, they become horrible. And in truth, they were always horrible. It's just that they didn't have the visibility to reveal that face, that true face of theirs. It's a saying that fame is the mask that eats onto the face. And I've seen YouTubers, content creators be devoured by it to the point where they are unrecognizable and horrible people. And seeing that made me also realize that I needed to be on my guard because, as you said, when one of your videos goes viral, your brain fires all of that dopamine, you feel great, etc. But there is an issue with that feeling, and that feeling can become very addictive, and it can turn you into someone you don't want to be, and you don't realize until it's too late. So it's great to always be a little bit detached. And this is why I love self-depreciating humor. I love making fun of myself because it makes the audience realize, hey, he's just a guy. He's just a
Mm.
bro like us.
Yeah, I try to do both. Like I go sometimes into, sometimes I'm like overly confident, refer to myself as Giga Chad and all these things. But I will also share, like I will joke at my own expense, but I also share, my weaknesses and that. That's something. If we're just going to be a little open and vulnerable, I realize something that I really want to be able to do, but I find quite difficult, is kind of admit struggle while I'm going through it. I've noticed that for me, I can be, because people give me like credit that I'm so open and vulnerable about certain things I've been through. For me, it's somehow very much easier when it's not going on anymore. But it's like, yeah, I'm talking about a dead person, kind of. But I've noticed this is again a thing with having a following, that if I don't feel too good, it's like I have to hide that from my followers somehow, and I don't want that. But it's a challenge, and because I see too, no one is perfect. I see too that it can get to your head to have all when you get a lot of positive attention too. So I think I'll never promise people that I'll be perfect and never slip up and be arrogant or rude at times. But I promise to always try to circle back because I've seen so many people that I enjoyed following once upon a time, and then I see them completely transform, and I just don't want to be that person.
Well, I'll keep an eye on your growth.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
always very
please.
happy to point out that when people fuck up. So,
Oh yes, please. I'll say that. That's something I notice. Like to me, it has meant a lot. When the channel blows up, and that, now talking to guys like you and Jeffrey, Atlas Power Shrug, I realize. Um, I worry that I'm gonna get like judged as someone I'm not, because I know that if you look at just some of my titles and don't look at the video at all, you could get an impression that, I don't know, some kind of red pill manosphere guy or something. So sometimes I can see that I worry a little bit, like these guys that I really like, and I feel like we're about the same things. I hope they see me for who I am. But I'd love to be criticized. When I step out of line.
yeah. And I think that's probably the perfect way to end this podcast.
Yeah, can I ask you about one last thing? Because I know we're short on time. We got through the main things I wanted, but one thing people wanted me to ask you about, so we can just say a little bit, just Berserk. That I've never been big on watching anime or reading manga, but it was when I found all the kind of noble natty guys at around the same time. It was mainly hearing Bald Omni-Man talk about it. And I'm like, okay, I gotta watch this thing. I watched the anime. It ends at like a crazy place, so I had to read the manga. And no, I really like it. So I don't know. People wanted us to talk about it. Could you just give your take on Berserk?
Oh, on Berserk in particular?
Uh, huh?
On Berserk in particular?
Yes.
Okay, well, Berserk, my history with Berserk is quite complicated because I discovered the book when I was 11. I used to go to a library to hang out, and the person who held the library liked me a lot, so she would give me books. But she was also very old, and she had no idea what most of the series she was giving me was, so she oftentimes gave me books that were not for my age. And when she saw Berserk, on the cover, she saw a knight, Guts. And so she was like, well, that's Knight. He loves like the Middle Ages. He's 11. That's perfect for him. So she started to make me read Berserk at 11, which was not age indicated at all. So I discovered the Eclipse when I was 11, which changes a man, changes a boy. But I've always had a very passionate relationship with Berserk because I've reread it a million times. And it has truly influenced who I am. And interestingly, I developed and I discovered philosophy through Berserk, because Berserk is very heavy in Nietzschean and Jungian themes, but I didn't read these authors back then. And so paradoxically, when I started reading Nietzsche, I kept like having my mind like throw back to Berserk, thinking, well, that's exactly what happens in Berserk. That's so weird. Then later you discover that Miura didn't just do it like randomly, it's on purpose. So whenever I hear people say anime or manga is stupid, it's shallow, etc., they describe it as cartoon, I'm always like, okay, go watch Berserk and come back to me. Because if you are honest with yourself, you will realize that when it comes to like the canon of masterpieces of the modern age, Berserk is one of them. It is amongst the greats. It's just as great as some of these books that are published. Just because there are drawings doesn't make it lesser of an art form. If anything, it's more of an art form because you have dialogue and images. And it's a read that I would recommend for pretty much 100% of people because it's going to change you positively or negatively. And it's also a very good test I found of media literacy because the amount of people who read Berserk and do not understand the themes fascinates me. For example, Berserk got in trouble and Miura got in trouble, I think 6 or 7 years ago, for being a sexist story because the women would get ravaged or hurt. And it's interesting to me because the read that I have of Berserk is the exact opposite. To me, Miura was a deeply feminist author, and Berserk is a feminist story because it tells the story of what happens in a world where women are no longer protected, a world that is
Mm.
hyperviolent, where men run rampant. Well, women are going to get hurt from that. That is not sexist to say, it's realistic. And if you look at the current situation in the world, where we protect women less and less, we see that the exact same thing happens. They get hurt more and more. So the story of Berserk is prophetic in a way. And I could go on and on and on.
Mm.
But my favorite character personally, and I don't know which one is your favorite character, is Serpico, because I see myself in him a lot.
Hmm. It was some time now, so just I recognize the name, but just remind me what character it is.
So Serpico is a servant character that is attached to Farnese, and he is very subservient on the surface, but then you find out that he has deeper emotional connections with her that makes him take this position as someone who apparently is meek and fragile, when in reality he's a very strong fighter, and he is someone that is very close to a fox archetype, whereas Guts is a pure lion archetype.
No, I remember the guy now. Yeah, it was some time ago. I read the entire thing, so I think I mainly thought about the Guts and Griffith, and I'll just give my take before we go. What kind of, like, there are many themes, but what stuck with me afterwards was thinking that, I mean, clearly it's kind of a story about the human condition, like overcoming struggle and trauma and just struggling on no matter what, kind of. But the way I saw it later was kind of that Guts and Griffith sort of represented the yin and yang, like the light and the dark. And maybe Guts is a little bit too deep in the darkness sometimes. And Griffith clearly flew too close to the sun, right? Like Icarus, and he got burnt. And then he made a pretty terrible choice. But that's what kind of stuck with me. That I'm like, okay, I want to be like Guts, like his morals, and no matter how tight the path is, or if there's mist in the way, like always kind of keep on struggling like that. But then I felt like you want to have that ambition and confidence of Griffith, though. I will have my kingdom, but maybe just pull yourself back before you get burnt on the sun. I can relate to Griffith a little bit in that sense. Throughout these years, a few times I got a little bit too high on myself, got burnt. I didn't sacrifice everyone that was there to be, though.
That's good to hear. Yeah, it's almost it's almost a cautionary tale on both sides of the
Mm,
effects of too much optimism or too much pessimism. And that's also a good way to look at Berserk because you can really put every single character on that balance and you realize the strength and the weaknesses of everyone.
yeah. No, I should probably give it a read again. But yes, I just want to say, guys, that since it was an age that started rounding off, that I knew what time he had here. So just so you don't think that I just keep him forever or ever and ever. But yes, it was great talking to you. No, I love this, and I'm sure I want to invite you in the future. Is there anything, any part? I guess you can tell everyone where we can find you also.
Yes, well, you can of course find me on YouTube. Now I stream every Saturday and Wednesday. So if you're someone who's into philosophy, I highly recommend you tune in on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. We are currently doing Jung and Jungian philosophy and psychology. And then eventually we'll do Dostoevsky and Nietzsche. And on Saturdays, the streams are either hypertrophy focused. So I do custom program reviews, I do physique reviews, where I point out the weaknesses of a physique. I give advice on how to develop a proper physique. I also do dating Q&As where I give people advice, love advice, and I do self-improvement. Sometimes there are story time streams where I just like tell the stories that happened to me in my life. These tend to be pretty laid back. And then there is just the content. So I will post videos ranging from hypertrophy to philosophy to self-improvement. It really doesn't make sense for the most part. There's no schedule. Whatever I want to do, I do.
Awesome. One quickie. That was something Jung I would have liked to talk a bit about another time. But I'm someone that doesn't really read all that much. I even make a bit of it that I don't really read. But I do want to start reading a bit more. Like I don't read, not at all. But Jung, I'm just quite familiar with his work through other sources. But when I get now, I'm thinking for next year, I'm gonna start read more. So, what book from Jung do you think? Where's the best place to start?
So a lot of people would point you towards young specialists that would summarize his work. This is not my approach to philosophy because to me it's eating someone else's regurgitated vomit.
Mm.
Instead, I recommend Modern Man in Search of a Soul because the first two chapters are essentially just there to tell you exactly what analytical psychology is and what Jung does. And then he goes chapter by chapter on topics that are very relevant to the modern man and is not that hard to understand.
All right. All right. Awesome. Well, we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, man. Thank you, guys. See you in the next one. Peace.